I walked into the building thinking my son was a king, only to find him on his knees like a servant. I visited my son Terrence on what was supposed to be his first day as the sales director at his father-in-law's logistics company. I wore my best suit, the one I bought 20 years ago, ready to beam with pride. But when I looked through the glass walls of the executive floor, I didn't see him sitting at a mahogany desk. I saw him in a gray jumpsuit holding a toilet brush scrubbing a urinal while his father-in-law stood over him laughing. "Look at him, Paige," the old man sneered, kicking a bucket of dirty mop water so it splashed onto my son's chest. "That is all he is good for. It is in his genetics." I waited for my daughter-in-law, the woman carrying my grandchild, to defend her husband. Instead, she covered her mouth and giggled. "Make it shine, baby," she said. "Daddy has VIPs coming tonight." My son looked up, tears streaming down his face, and saw me standing there. He didn't wave. He mouthed the word run. I did not run. I stepped outside, pulled out my cracked old flip phone, and dialed my lawyer. "Burn it down, Sarah," I said. "Trigger clause 14. I want this building empty by midnight." My name is Elijah Freeman. They think I am a retired janitor living on a pension. They do not know I own the ground they are standing on. And today, I am going to remind them who really holds the keys. If you have ever been underestimated because of how you look, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me tell you how I brought an empire to its knees without throwing a single punch. The morning sun hit the glass facade of Harrington Logistics like a spotlight on a stage. I stood on the sidewalk adjusting my tie. It was a little tight around the neck and the fabric was worn shiny at the elbows, but it was clean. I had ironed it myself at 5 in the morning. Today was important. My son Terrence had called me a week ago, his voice bursting with excitement. "Paige's dad finally gave me a shot, Dad," he had said. "Director of sales. Can you believe it?" I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that Richard Harrington, a man who had looked at me at the wedding like I was something he had stepped in, had finally seen the worth in my boy. Terrence was smart. He had a degree. He worked hard. So I took the bus downtown, holding a small gift bag with a fountain pen inside. It wasn't expensive, but it was significant. It was the pen I used to sign my first contract 40 years ago. I walked through the revolving doors. The lobby was freezing, smelling of expensive cologne and ozone. I approached the front desk. The receptionist, a young woman with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, didn't even look up from her screen. "Excuse me, miss," I said, smiling. "I am here to see Terrence Freeman. He is starting today on the executive floor." She finally looked up. Her eyes scanned my scuffed shoes, my dated suit, and the plastic bag in my hand. Her lip curled just a fraction. "Deliveries are in the back, old man. Service elevator." "I am not a delivery man," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I am his father." She let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, you must be mistaken. We don't have a Mr. Freeman on the executive list. We have a custodial subcontractor named Freeman. Maybe check the basement." My stomach turned over. Custodial. The word hung in the air. I knew that word. I had lived that word for 40 years. But Terrence was supposed to be in sales. "I'll find him myself," I said, walking past her desk toward the elevators. "Hey, you can't go up there," she shouted, reaching for her phone. I ignored her. I knew this building. I knew the layout better than the architect who designed it because I was the one who installed the waste management systems 20 years ago when they broke ground. I pressed the button for the 40th floor. The doors slid shut, cutting off her protests. When the doors opened, I stepped onto plush carpet. It was quiet up here. The air smelled different, like money and silence. I walked down the long corridor looking for Terrence's name on a door. I saw Vice President, CEO, CFO. No Freeman. Then I heard laughter. It was coming from the end of the hall near the executive washroom. This wasn't a normal bathroom. It was one of those modern architectural nightmares with frosted glass walls that turned clear when you locked the door, a display of excess and power. But right now the door was propped open. I stopped. Through the glass I saw him. Terrence. He wasn't wearing the navy blue suit he had shown me last week. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit that was too short in the legs. He was on his knees. His head was bowed, his shoulders shaking. In his hand was a blue toilet brush. He was scrubbing the rim of a urinal. My heart stopped beating. The blood in my veins turned to ice. This was my boy. The boy I had put through college working double shifts. The boy who had dreams of running his own company. Standing over him was Richard Harrington. He was holding a scotch glass, looking down at Terrence with a look of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. Next to him was Paige, my daughter-in-law. She was leaning against the marble sink checking her makeup in the mirror, completely ignoring the fact that her husband was on his knees 3 feet away. "You missed a spot, Freeman," Richard said. His voice was loud, booming off the tiled walls. Terrence didn't look up. He just scrubbed harder. I stepped closer, my shoes making no sound on the carpet. I needed to understand. Maybe this was a joke. Maybe it was some twisted initiation ritual. Then Richard did something that made me see red. He lifted his foot, clad in a glossy Italian leather loafer, and kicked the yellow mop bucket sitting next to Terrence. The bucket tipped. Gray soapy water sloshed out, soaking the knees of Terrence's jumpsuit and splashing onto his chest. "Oops," Richard said, grinning. "Clumsy me. Clean that up, boy. And use your hands. We don't want to waste any more towels." Terrence froze. He gripped the brush so hard his knuckles turned white. I looked at Paige. Surely she would say something. Surely the woman who claimed to love my son would stop this madness. Paige turned from the mirror. She looked at the puddles spreading around her husband's knees. "Ugh, Terrence," she sighed, lifting the hem of her dress. "Watch where you're splashing that filth. My dad paid $3,000 for these shoes." "I am sorry," Paige Terrence whispered. His voice was broken. It was the voice of a man who had forgotten his own name. Richard laughed again, a deep, guttural sound. "Look at him, Paige. Look at your husband. I told you. You can put a suit on a Freeman, but you can't take the janitor out of the bloodline. It is all he knows how to do. It is all his daddy knew how to do, scrubbing other men's waste." Paige giggled. "You were right, Daddy. You are always right. Just make sure he is done by 5. We have dinner reservations at Lamont." "He will be done when I say he is done," Richard said. "Or he can go explain to the insurance company why your maternity coverage is canceled." That was the key. The insurance. The baby. They had him trapped. They were using my grandchild as leverage to turn a grown man into a slave. I could not watch anymore. I pushed the door open. It hit the stopper with a loud thud. The 3 of them turned. Richard's eyes widened for a second, then narrowed into a sneer. "Well, well. Speak of the devil. The head janitor himself. Did you come to give him a tutorial, Elijah?" "Show him the proper circular motion." Paige rolled her eyes. "Oh, great. Now we have to smell mothballs and Old Spice." Terrence scrambled to his feet. He slipped in the soapy water and almost fell. He looked at me, and the shame in his eyes was absolute. It was a physical weight crushing him. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, please, go." He didn't say, "Help me," he said, "Go." He wanted to protect me from seeing him like this. He wanted to spare me the pain. I looked at Richard. I looked at the way he held his glass, the way he stood with his weight on one hip, confident, untouchable. He thought he was a god in his glass tower. I looked at Paige. She was looking at her fingernails bored. And then I looked at my son. "Get up, Terrence," I said. My voice was low, but it didn't tremble. "Dad." "Please," Terrence whispered, terrified. "If I leave, the insurance, the baby. Just go home. I can handle this." He couldn't handle it. He was already drowning. Richard took a step toward me. "You heard him, Elijah. Get out. This is an executive floor. We have a dress code. And your Goodwill clearance rack suit is violating about 5 different health codes." I didn't blink. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my fist, though every muscle in my body wanted to drive it into his jaw. Violence is the tool of the weak, and today I was the strongest man in the room. I looked Richard dead in the eye. "You have made a mistake, Richard." Richard laughed. "The only mistake I made was letting my daughter marry into your gene pool. Now get out before I call security and have you thrown out with the rest of the trash." I turned to Terrence. "I love you, son. Remember who you are." Then I turned my back on them. I walked out of that bathroom. I walked down the long plush corridor. I could hear Richard's laughter following me to the elevator. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I walked past the receptionist who smirked at me. I walked out the revolving doors and onto the busy street. The noise of the city washed over me. Cars, honking, people shouting. I took a deep breath of the exhaust-filled air. It tasted like freedom. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out a phone. It wasn't the smartphone everyone else used. It was a thick black, industrial-grade satellite phone. It didn't have games. It didn't have a camera. It had a direct encrypted line to one person. I dialed the number. It rang once. "Sarah," I said. "Mr. Freeman." Her voice was sharp alert. She was the best corporate attorney in the state, and she only answered this line for me. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said, looking up at the gleaming steel and glass of the Harrington Logistics building. It towered over the street, arrogant and imposing. "Activate Clause 14, I said. There was a pause on the line. Clause 14. "Sir, that's the nuclear option. That revokes the ground lease immediately based on moral turpitude and breach of contract. It will trigger a massive recall of all sanitation services. It will effectively shut down the building's infrastructure." "I know what it does, Sarah," I said. "I wrote it." "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "This is Harrington. He's your in-law. He is not my in-law," I said, my voice cold as the grave. "He is a tenant who just forgot who his landlord is. I want the water cut off. I want the waste disposal units locked. I want the HVAC system powered down, and I want the eviction notice served by hand within the hour." "Understood, Mr. Freeman," Sarah said. "Initiating now." I hung up the phone. I looked at the building one last time. I saw the lights on the 40th floor. "Scrub hard, Richard," I whispered to myself, "because you are about to find out that when you flush the toilet, I am the one who decides where it goes." I turned and walked toward the bus stop. I had a lot of work to do. My son was broken and I had to fix him. But first I had to destroy the man who broke him. This wasn't just business anymore. This was war. And Richard Harrington had just brought a knife to a nuclear fight. I sat in the corner booth of a 24-hour diner 3 blocks from the Harrington building. The vinyl seat was cracked and taped over with silver duct tape. The air smelled of burnt coffee and stale grease. It was the kind of place where men went when they did not want to be found. I stared at the cold cup of coffee in front of me. My hands were steady, but my blood was boiling. I was waiting for my son. Terrence walked in 10 minutes later. He had changed out of the gray jumpsuit and back into his cheap suit, but he still looked like he was wearing the uniform of a prisoner. His shoulders were slumped forward. He walked with a heavy dragging step that I had never seen before. He slid into the booth opposite me and did not make eye contact. He looked at his hands. His knuckles were red and raw from the harsh chemicals and the scrubbing. I did not say anything. I let the silence hang between us. I needed him to speak first. I needed him to break the seal on the shame he was carrying. "There never was a job, Dad," Terrence finally whispered. His voice was so low I had to lean in to hear him. I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The sales director position. It was never real. Richard invited me to his office last week. He told me he had a position for me. He told Paige it was executive track. But when I got there this morning, he handed me the brush." "Then why did you stay?" I asked. The question was simple, but the answer I knew would be complicated. "Why did you get on your knees, Terrence?" Terrence closed his eyes. Tears leaked out from under his lashes. "Because of the baby. Paige is high risk, Dad. Her insurance premiums are astronomical. I lost my coverage when I got laid off from the warehouse last month. Richard knows that. He presented me with a contract this morning. It is a subcontractor agreement, minimum wage, no benefits, but it includes a rider for full family medical coverage provided I complete a 6-month probationary period without a single infraction." "He trapped you," I said. "He owns me," Terrence corrected. "He told me if I walked out that door today, Paige loses her doctors. She loses the hospital. I cannot do that to my wife, Dad. I cannot do that to my unborn child. So I scrubbed. I would scrub the whole city with a toothbrush if it meant my son is born healthy." I looked at the man sitting across from me. I saw the love he had for his family. It was a weapon Richard was using against him. Richard had taken the noblest thing about my son and turned it into a chain. "And Paige?" I asked. She stood there and laughed, Terrence. "She is scared, Dad," Terrence said quickly. Too quickly. He was defending her. He was trained to defend her. "She just wants her father's approval. She is caught in the middle. She is not in the middle, son. She is holding the whip." Terrence shook his head. "You do not understand. You have always been alone. You do not know what it is like to try and keep a family together when you have nothing." I wanted to slam my fist on the table. I wanted to scream that I had everything. I wanted to tell him that I could buy Richard's company and turn it into a parking lot by tomorrow afternoon. But I stopped. Not yet. He needed to see the truth for himself. If I saved him now, he would never learn to fight. He would just trade one master for another. Just then, Terrence's phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up with a picture of Paige. She looked beautiful and sweet in the photo. It was a lie. Terrence flinched like he had been burned. He reached for the phone with a trembling hand. "Answer it," I said. "Put it on speaker." "Dad, I cannot." "Put it on speaker, Terrence. I want to hear what your loving wife has to say." Terrence pressed the button. His hand was shaking so bad the phone rattled against the laminate tabletop. "Hello, Paige," he said. His voice was weak. It was the voice of a beaten dog. "Where the hell are you?" Paige's voice shrieked from the speaker. It was loud enough that the waitress at the counter turned to look. "I am just grabbing a coffee." Terrence stammered, "I will be home in 20 minutes. "Coffee. You are drinking coffee. My father told me you left with that old beggar you call a father. Are you spending our money on him?" Terrence looked at me. His eyes were wide with panic. "No, Paige. I am just talking to him. He is my dad. I do not care who he is. He is a loser, Terrence, and he is dragging you down with him. My father gave you a chance today, a generous chance, and you humiliated me. You let that old man walk in there in his trash can suit and disrespect my family. He did not disrespect anyone, Paige. He just came to see me. You are supposed to be working. You are supposed to be earning your keep. Do you know how embarrassing it is for me to have a husband who cleans toilets? My friends are asking what you do and I have to lie. I have to tell them you are in consulting. You are pathetic." I saw Terrence shrink. I saw him fold in on himself. He was accepting her words. He believed them. "Get your ass home right now," Paige screamed. "And you better not bring that old man near my house. If I see his face, I will call the police. I swear to God, Terrence, if you are not here in 10 minutes, you can sleep on the street. I am sick of looking at you." That was it. The line had been crossed. It had been stomped on and spit on. I reached across the table. My hand moved faster than Terrence could react. I grabbed the phone. I brought it to my face. "Listen to me very carefully, you spoiled little witch," I said. My voice was low. It was a growl from the bottom of my chest. "Who is this?" Paige demanded. "Is that you, Elijah? Put my husband back on." "Shut your mouth," I said. The words came out like bullets. There was a stunned silence on the other end. No one had ever spoken to Paige Harrington like that, not in her entire pampered life. "You do not talk to my son like that," I continued. "You do not threaten him. And you certainly do not threaten me. You listen to me, old man." Paige hissed. Her voice was venomous. "You are nothing. You are a broke retired janitor who smells like bleach and desperation. You have no power here. This is my house. This is my husband. And if you do not like how I talk to him, you can take him. Go ahead. Take him. He is useless anyway. But if he walks out that door, he is leaving the insurance behind. He is leaving his child behind. You do not deserve his child," I said. "And you do not deserve to breathe the same air as my father." Paige screamed, "Get off the phone! Terrence, come home now or I am changing the locks." She hung up. The silence that followed was heavy. It felt physical. Terrence stared at the phone in my hand. His face was gray. "Why did you do that?" he whispered. He looked terrified. "She's going to kick me out, Dad. She means it." "Let her," I said. I put the phone down. "You do not need her, Terrence." "I do need her," he said. His voice rose. He was angry now, angry at me. "You do not get it. You live in your little paid-off shack with your pension checks. You do not have real problems. I have a baby coming. I have nowhere to go." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my wallet. It was an old leather bifold cracked at the spine. I opened it and pulled out a card. It wasn't my black card. It wasn't the platinum card I used for corporate acquisitions. It was a standard gray debit card from a local credit union. The plastic was peeling at the corners. It looked like the card of a man who lived check to check. But this card was linked to a private holding account with a balance of $5 million. I kept it for emergencies. This was an emergency. "Take this," I said. I slid the card across the table. "Go to the Regency Hotel. Get a suite. Order room service. Sleep in a bed that doesn't have strings attached. Do not go back to that house tonight." Terrence looked at the card. He looked at me. He laughed. It was a bitter sound. "Dad, stop. Take it, Terrence. The pin is your birthday." He pushed the card back to me. "Dad, you probably have $500 in that account. A night at the Regency is $400. Then what? What do you eat for the rest of the month?" "I have enough," I said. "No, you don't. You scrimp and save on groceries. You wear the same suit for 20 years. I know what you have. He reached into his own pocket. He pulled out a crumpled wad of bills. Ones and fives, maybe $20 total. It was his tip money from a previous delivery job. Here, he said. He tried to press the money into my hand. What is this? I asked. Take it, Terrence said. His eyes filled with tears again. Buy some of that ointment for your back. I know your back hurts. I see how you walk. Just take it, Dad, please. Let me do something. Let me feel like I am not completely useless. I looked at the money. I looked at my son. He was drowning. He was being crushed by the weight of the world. And yet here he was trying to give his last $20 to his father because he thought I was weak. He thought I was poor. He had no idea. I closed my hand around his fingers. I pushed the money back to him. Keep your money, son, I said. I do not need it. Just go home, Dad, Terrence said. He stood up. He looked exhausted. I have to go back. I have to beg her to let me in. I have to fix what you broke. He didn't wait for me to answer. He turned and walked out of the diner. The bell above the door chimed a cheerful little ding that sounded like a mockery. I watched him go. I watched him walk down the street, his head bowed, his shoulders hunched against the wind. He looked like a man marching to the gallows. I sat there in the booth alone. The coffee was cold. I remembered when he was a boy. He was 10 years old. He had come home crying because a bigger boy had pushed him down and taken his lunch money. I had wiped his face. I had told him, Terrence, never bow your head. The world will try to push you down. It will try to make you feel small, but you are a freeman. You stand tall. I had taught him to be humble. I had taught him that money did not make the man. I had hidden my success because I wanted him to build his own character. I wanted him to know the value of $1. I was wrong. I had sent a sheep out into a world of wolves. I thought I was teaching him integrity, but I had only taught him how to suffer. I had taught him how to be a victim. Richard and Paige did not respect humility. They ate it alive. They saw his kindness as weakness. They saw his poverty as a moral failing. And because I had played the part of the poor old janitor, I had let them believe it. I had given them the ammunition to destroy my son. I looked at the gray debit card sitting on the table. It was useless if he wouldn't take it. Money was useless if he didn't know he had it. He needed to see. He needed to know. I picked up the card and put it back in my wallet. Then I picked up my satellite phone. I dialed Sarah again. Get the jet ready, I said. Sir, Sarah asked. It is late. Where are we going? We are not going anywhere, I said. I am staying right here, but tomorrow morning I am going to buy a building. Which building, sir? Harrington Logistics, I said. And Sarah, get me everything you have on Paige Harrington. I want to know where she shops. I want to know who her friends are. And I want to know exactly what is happening with this pregnancy. Why, sir? Because my son thinks she is a prize, I said. I stood up and threw a $100 bill on the table for the coffee. I need to show him she is just a receipt. I walked out of the diner. The night air was cold, but I didn't feel it. The sleeping giant had woken up, and he was very, very angry. The next morning I stood in the hallway of the Meridian Tower. It was a glass needle of a building that pierced the skyline of the city. This was where my son lived. Or rather, this was where Richard Harrington allowed my son to sleep. The rent in this building was $4,000 a month. Terrence could not afford the parking spot, let alone the apartment. Richard paid the lease. He held it over Terrence's head like a guillotine blade ready to drop the moment my son stopped scrubbing. I knew Terrence was at work. He had texted me at 6 in the morning apologizing again for the diner. He said he had to get to the office early to prep the executive washroom for a board meeting. My blood boiled, but I kept my reply simple. I told him I loved him. I was here for Paige. I needed to understand the enemy. I needed to see the woman who had turned my strong, proud boy into a trembling servant. I intended to knock on the door and demand a conversation. I wanted to look her in the eye without Terrence there to protect her. But when I reached apartment 4B, I stopped. I heard music. It was loud, thumping bass that vibrated through the heavy oak door. It was 10 in the morning on a Wednesday. Paige was supposed to be 7 months pregnant. She was supposed to be high risk. She was supposed to be on strict bed rest. That was the whole reason Terrence was on his knees scrubbing floors, to keep her insurance, to keep her and the baby safe. I did not knock. I looked at the lock. It was a smart lock with a keypad, but it also had a physical keyway for emergencies. A Schlager high-security cylinder. Most people trust technology. I trust mechanics. Before I built my sanitation empire, I was a maintenance man for 20 years. I fixed boilers. I unclogged pipes. And I opened doors for people who lost their keys. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my tension wrench and a diamond pick. My hands were old and calloused, but they were steady. I slid the pick into the keyway. I felt the pins. 1, 2, 3. I applied tension. The mechanism was stiff, but it gave way. I felt the cylinder turn. The lock clicked. It was a soft sound masked by the bass of the music inside. I pushed the door open an inch. The air conditioning hit my face, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and marijuana smoke. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. I moved silently across the bamboo flooring. I was a ghost in a suit bought at a thrift store. The apartment was a shrine to modern excess. White leather furniture, abstract art that cost more than my house. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. In the living room, 3 women were sitting around the glass coffee table. One of them was Paige. She was wearing a silk robe that was open at the front. Underneath, she wore a bikini. She was holding a crystal flute filled with golden liquid. Champagne. But that was not what made my breath catch in my throat. That was not what made the world tilt on its axis. It was her stomach. Her stomach was flat. It was perfectly flat. There was no baby bump. There was no swollen curve of life. Her skin was tanned and toned. I looked at the coffee table. Sitting there amidst the empty champagne bottles and the overflowing ashtrays was a mound of flesh-colored silicone. It had straps and Velcro attachments. It was a prosthetic belly, a high-end theatrical prop. I stood in the shadow of the hallway, paralyzed by the magnitude of the lie. There was no baby. There never was a baby. My son was scrubbing toilets for a phantom. I watched as Paige took a long drag from a joint and passed it to the blonde woman sitting next to her. She threw her head back and laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. "You should have seen him this morning, Brittany," Paige said. Her voice was slurred. He looked like a beaten dog. Daddy made him clean the grout with a toothbrush. I almost felt bad. Almost. The blonde woman giggled. "You are terrible, Paige. How long are you going to keep this up?" "As long as I need to," Paige said. She gestured with her champagne glass. "Do you know how hard it is to find good help these days? Terrence does everything. He cooks, he cleans, he rubs my feet because he thinks they are swollen. He is the perfect slave, and the best part is he thinks he is being noble. He thinks he is sacrificing himself for his legacy." She laughed again and poured more champagne. "But what happens in 2 months?" the third woman asked. She looked nervous. "When the baby is supposed to come?" "I will have a tragic miscarriage," Paige said. She said it with the same casual tone one would use to order a salad. "I have it all planned out. I will fall down the stairs. Or maybe I will just start screaming in the middle of the night. We go to the hospital. Daddy has a doctor on payroll who will sign the papers. We lose the baby. Terrence will be devastated, of course. He will work even harder to comfort me. He will be so guilty he won't even ask questions." "That is evil," Brittany said admiringly. "It is business," Paige corrected. "Daddy needs cheap labor in the sanitation department. Terrence has a degree but no backbone. We get 5 years out of him minimum. By then he will be too broken to leave. And if he does try to leave, I will just tell him I am pregnant again. These Freeman men are so stupid. They breed like rabbits and think with their hearts." She took a sip of her drink. "Besides," she added, "look at this apartment. Look at this life. Do you think I would let a janitor's son actually touch me? Do you think I would let his genetics mix with mine? Please." The pillow is the closest he gets to intimacy. I felt a rage so pure and so white-hot that my vision blurred. I wanted to step into that room. I wanted to flip that glass table. I wanted to scream the truth until the window shattered. I wanted to tear that silicone lie apart with my bare hands. But I stopped myself. If I walked in there now, she would scream. She would call the police. She would say I attacked her. She would say the stress caused the miscarriage. She would spin a web of lies that Terrence would believe because he was conditioned to believe her. He was programmed to protect her. He needed to see this. He needed to see the flat stomach. He needed to hear the words coming from her mouth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It was old, but the camera lens was clear. I stepped out of the shadows just enough to get a clear angle. I pressed record. I filmed the silicone belly sitting on the table like a trophy. I filmed the champagne bottles. I filmed the smoke curling in the air. And I filmed Paige. I zoomed in on her flat stomach. I zoomed in on her face as she mocked my son. And he cried when he saw his dad. She was saying, "Can you believe it?" The old man looked like he crawled out of a dumpster. Daddy kicked a bucket of water on Terrence just to see if he would snap. And he didn't. He just kept scrubbing. It was pathetic. I almost vomited. I recorded every word. I recorded the laughter of her friends. I recorded the confession of a conspiracy so vile it made me sick to my stomach. I recorded for 3 minutes. I got everything. The plan, the doctor on payroll, the fake miscarriage, the contempt. Then I stopped recording. I saved the video to the internal memory and simultaneously uploaded it to a secure cloud server Sarah managed. I had the bullet. Now I needed to aim the gun. I backed away slowly. The floorboards in the hallway were high-quality soundproofed cork. I made no noise. I reached the front door. My hand hovered over the handle. Just then, the music stopped. The playlist had ended. In the sudden silence, a floorboard settled under my weight. It was a tiny sound, a creak. Paige's head snapped toward the hallway. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "It is probably the wind," Brittany said. "You are paranoid." "No." Paige stood up. She tightened her robe. "Someone is here." I didn't wait. I turned the handle and slipped out into the corridor. I pulled the door shut gently until the latch clicked. I walked fast toward the stairwell. I didn't take the elevator. The elevator had cameras. I heard the apartment door open behind me. "Hello?" Paige's voice echoed in the hallway. "Who is there?" I was already around the corner and into the stairwell. I descended 2 flights of stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I stopped on the landing of the 2nd floor to catch my breath. I checked the video on my phone. It was perfect. The image was crisp. The audio was clear. I had the truth in my pocket. But I couldn't show Terrence yet. Not like this. If I showed him the video on a small phone screen in a diner, he might snap. He might do something rash. He might go back there and get himself arrested. Richard owned the police in this district. If Terrence laid a hand on Paige, he would go to prison for 20 years. I needed to break him out of the prison of his mind before I could show him the key. I needed him to see Richard and Paige for what they truly were in a setting where they could not hide. I needed a stage. I walked out of the service exit of the building. The sun was high in the sky now. The city was bustling. I hailed a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked. "The bank," I said. "Which one?" "The main branch," I said. "I need to make a withdrawal." I was done playing the poor man. I was done hiding in the shadows. My son was being tortured by a woman who wasn't even carrying his child. He was being enslaved by a man who treated him like livestock. They wanted a janitor. I would give them a janitor. I would clean their entire lives out. I took out my phone and called Sarah. "Change of plans," I said. "Sir, I have evidence of fraud," I said. "Medical fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. You found something on Harrington. I found everything, Sarah. I found the devil in a bikini. What do you want to do?" "I want to buy the debt," I said. "Not just the building. I want Richard Harrington's personal debt. I want his mortgage. I want his car notes. I want his credit lines. That will take time, sir. You have until tonight," I said. "Tonight. Why tonight?" "Because tonight is the party," I said. "Richard is hosting a gala for his VIPs. He is going to parade my son around like a servant. He is going to celebrate his success." I paused. "I am going to crash that party, Sarah, and I am going to bring the house down." I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at the passing city. Paige thought she was smart. She thought she was playing a game with pawns. She didn't know the king had just entered the board, and the king was coming for her head. I stood outside the door of apartment 4B at the Meridian Tower. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Terrence. "Dad, please come back. We need to talk. Mom is asleep. We can fix this." It was the invitation I needed. I knew it was a trap. I knew Terrence did not have the courage to summon me on his own. Richard was pulling the strings. He wanted me back there to finish what he started in the bathroom. He wanted to break me the way he broke my son. I knocked. The door swung open instantly. It wasn't Terrence standing there. It was Richard. He was grinning like a wolf who had cornered a wounded deer. Behind him, Paige was reclining on the white leather sofa, sipping water, looking frail and victimized. Terrence stood in the corner, his head bowed, looking at his shoes. "You have some nerve coming back here," Elijah Richard said. His voice was loud, theatrical. He was performing for an audience I could not see yet. "My son invited me," I said, stepping into the foyer. I looked at Terrence. "Tell him, son. Tell him you asked me to come." Terrence opened his mouth, but Richard cut him off. "He did no such thing. You broke in here earlier. We saw you on the corridor cameras. And now you are back to harass my pregnant daughter. You are trespassing Elijah. And in this building, we do not take kindly to intruders." He pulled his phone from his pocket. He didn't dial. The call was already active. "Officer," he said into the phone, "he is here. He is inside the apartment." "Yes. He is aggressive. I fear for my daughter's safety. Send them up." He hung up and smiled. A cold, predatory smile. "They are already in the lobby, Elijah. I called them 5 minutes ago. You walked right into it." Terrence looked up, his eyes wide with panic. "Richard, you said we were just going to talk to him. You said no police." "Shut up!" Terrence Page snapped from the couch. He broke in. "He is crazy. He needs to learn a lesson." The elevator chimed down the hall. Heavy boots hit the floorboards. The police were fast, too fast. Richard must have told them there was a violent threat. 2 officers burst through the open door. Their hands were on their holsters. One was young, eager. The other was older, tired. They saw the scene immediately. A wealthy white man in a bespoke suit standing protectively over his daughter, and an old black man in a thrift store suit standing in the entryway. "Get on the ground," the young officer yelled. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask for ID. He pulled his taser. I did not move. I did not get on the ground. I raised my hands slowly, palms open. "Officer?" "I am invited here," I said calmly. "Ask the resident. Ask my son." The officer ignored me. He rushed forward, grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. He kicked my legs apart. He slammed my chest against the wall. "Stop resisting," he shouted, though I was standing perfectly still. I heard the zip of handcuffs. I felt the cold steel bite into my wrists. They wrenched my arms behind my back with unnecessary force. A sharp pain shot through my shoulder, an old injury from years of hauling heavy trash cans. "That is him, Officer," Richard said. "He is unstable. He has been stalking us all day. He thinks he owns this place. Take him away before he hurts someone." Terrence took a step forward. "Stop. That is my father. He didn't do anything." "Stay back, sir," the older officer warned Terrence. "We have a complaint of criminal trespass and menacing." I turned my head against the wall to look at my son. He was crying again. He was watching his father being treated like a criminal in his own home, and he was powerless to stop it. This was Richard's goal, to show Terrence that I was weak, that the law was on Richard's side, that money made right. "Bring him out," the young officer said, shoving me toward the door. I dug my heels into the carpet. I stopped. I turned my head to look the older officer in the eye. "Officer," I said. My voice was low, hard steel. "Before you take me out of this building in cuffs, you need to make a phone call." The officer laughed. "You get your phone call at the station, Grandpa. Move it." "Check my wallet," I said. "Left breast pocket." He hesitated. Something in my tone made him pause. It wasn't the voice of a man who was afraid. It was the voice of a man who was giving an order. He reached into my pocket. He pulled out my old cracked leather wallet. He flipped it open. There was no driver's license in the window. There was a card, a thick gold-embossed business card. It read, "Police Benevolent Association, Gold Shield Sponsor, Lifetime Member," and on the back was a handwritten number. "Call that number," I said. "It is a direct line." The officer looked at the card. He looked at me. He looked at the name on the card, Elijah Freeman. "Who is this?" he asked. "That is the private cell phone of Chief Miller," I said. "We played chess last Tuesday. He told me if I ever had trouble with his officers, I should call him. I think this qualifies as trouble." Richard scoffed. "Do not listen to him. He found that wallet in the trash. He is a janitor. He probably cleans the station floors." "Call it," I repeated. "Unless you want to explain to Chief Miller why his chess partner is sitting in a holding cell on a trumped-up charge." The older officer's eyes narrowed. He handed the card to his partner and pulled out his radio. He keyed the mic. "Dispatch, patch me through to the chief. Priority 1. There was a crackle of static. Then a voice I recognized. "Miller." "Go ahead." "Chief, this is Sergeant Davis. I have a suspect in custody at the Meridian. He claims he knows you. Name is Elijah Freeman." There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. Richard smirked. "He is going to tell you to book him," Richard said. Then the chief's voice roared through the radio. It was loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Did you say Elijah Freeman?" "Yes, sir." "Is he in cuffs, Sergeant?" "Yes, sir." "Get them off. Now." Do you know who that man is? That man paid for the new tactical vests you are wearing right now. That man funded the Widow's Fund single-handedly last year. If you have laid a finger on him, you better pray he is in a forgiving mood. Apologize and get out of there, immediately. The color drained from the sergeant's face. He looked at his radio like it had bitten him. Yes, sir. Understood, sir. He fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking. He unlocked the cuffs. He stepped back as if I were radioactive. Mr. Freeman, he stammered. I am so sorry. We didn't know. The complaint, it seemed credible. I rubbed my wrists. I looked at the officer. You were doing your job, Sergeant, but next time check the facts before you put an innocent man against the wall. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The officers backed out of the room. They didn't look at Richard. They didn't look at Paige. They just wanted to be as far away from me as possible. The door clicked shut. The silence in the apartment was absolute. Richard stared at me. His mouth hung slightly open. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by confusion and suspicion. What was that? Paige whispered. She sat up on the couch, forgetting her act of being frail. How do you know the police chief? Richard shook his head. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. It sounded forced. Corruption, he spat. That is what that was. I knew you were dirty, Elijah, but I didn't know you were deep in it. Who are you laundering money for? The gangs, the mob. You clean their toilets and they give you a get-out-of-jail-free card. He turned to Terrence. You see this, son. Your father is a criminal. That is the only explanation. No honest janitor has the police chief on speed dial. He is mixed up in something bad. I did not deny it. I did not explain. Let them think I was a criminal. Let them think I was dangerous. Fear was a useful tool. I fixed my cuffs. I straightened my tie. Are we done here, Richard? I asked. Or do you want to call the fire department next? Maybe I know the fire marshal too. Richard's face turned red. He stepped into my personal space. He was trying to regain control. He was trying to be the big man again. You think this makes you powerful, he hissed. You think because you have some dirty friends you can walk into my house and dictate terms. You are still nothing. You are still the man who scrubs waste for a living. And your son is still my employee. He gestured to Terrence. Look at him, Elijah. He is terrified. He knows who holds his leash. You can flash your little gold cards all you want, but at the end of the day, I sign his checks. I own his future. I looked at Terrence. Richard was right about one thing. Terrence was terrified. He was looking back and forth between us like a child watching his parents fight. He didn't understand what had just happened. He didn't understand who I was. I am not going anywhere, Richard, I said. Good, Richard said. His eyes lit up. He had an idea. A malicious, cruel idea. Since you are so connected, Elijah, since you are such a big man now, why don't you come tonight? Tonight, I asked. The gala, Richard said. The company anniversary. It is at the grand ballroom downstairs. All the VIPs will be there. The mayor, the senators, my investors. He smiled. It was the smile of a man laying a trap. I want you to come as my guest. I want you to see Terrence in his element. He is going to be helping out with the service. It is a great opportunity for him to show his work ethic. I knew exactly what he meant. He was going to make Terrence work as a server. Or a busboy. He was going to parade him in front of the city's elite in a uniform. And he wanted me there to watch. He wanted to humiliate me by humiliating my son. He wanted to show everyone that the Freemans were servants, that we belonged in the background holding trays and cleaning spills. It was a public execution of our dignity. Please, Dad, don't come, Terrence whispered. He looked sick. Oh, he has to come, Paige chimed in. She had recovered her composure. She smirked. We would love to have you, Elijah. I will even save you a plate in the kitchen. I looked at Richard. I looked at the challenge in his eyes. He thought he had me. He thought I would be too ashamed to show my face. He thought I would slink away. He didn't know that I had already bought his debt. He didn't know that I had the papers in my car. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all day. I would be delighted, Richard, I said. Richard blinked. He hadn't expected that. Great, he said, recovering. Black tie optional. Try to find a suit that fits. I will see you at 8, I said. I turned to Terrence. Keep your head up, son. Tonight is going to be a night to remember. I walked out of the apartment. I didn't look back. I took the elevator down to the lobby. I walked out to the street. My driver was waiting around the corner in the black SUV I usually kept hidden. I opened the door and climbed in. Sarah was sitting in the back seat. She had a stack of folders on her lap. "Did you get it?" I asked. "I got it all, Mr. Freeman," she said. "The mortgage, the business loans, the personal lines of credit. You own every cent of debt Richard Harrington has. You own his house. You own his car. You own his company." "Good," I said. "And the video?" she asked. "I have it," I said. "We are ready then." "Not quite," I said. I looked down at my worn suit. I looked at my scuffed shoes. "Take me to my tailor," I said, "and then take me to the barber." Richard wanted a show. I was going to give him a show. I was going to walk into that ballroom and I was going to shine so bright it would burn his eyes out. Tonight, the janitor dies, and the owner is born. I stepped out of the black SUV and buttoned my jacket. It was a Tom Ford custom-fit charcoal gray wool that cost more than Richard Harrington's car payments. I had shaved my beard, leaving only a trimmed mustache, and the barber had oiled my scalp until it shone under the streetlights. I did not look like a janitor. I looked like the man who owned the janitor's boss. I walked through the gold revolving doors of the grand ballroom. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and money. A string quartet was playing in the corner. Men in tuxedos held court with women in silk gowns. I scanned the room. I was looking for my son. I expected to see him in a corner, perhaps wearing a cheap suit, looking uncomfortable. I did not see him. Then a waiter walked past me with a tray of champagne flutes. He kept his head down. His shoulders were hunched. It was Terrence. He was wearing a white server's jacket that was too tight across the shoulders, and black pants that were too short. Richard had put my son in a uniform. He had made the director of sales a busboy at his own welcome party. Terrence looked up and saw me. His eyes went wide. He almost dropped the tray. He looked at my suit. He looked at my shoes. Confusion warred with shame on his face. "Dad," he mouthed, "what are you doing?" I did not answer. I walked straight into the center of the room. Heads turned. People stopped talking. They didn't know who I was, but they knew I didn't belong in the background. I radiated a silence that demanded attention. Richard was on the stage holding a microphone. He was flushed with alcohol and victory. He saw me. His smile faltered for a second when he saw the suit, but then his arrogance took over. He saw an opportunity. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "I want to introduce a very special guest." He pointed a finger at me. The spotlight swung around, blinding me for a second. "This is Elijah Freeman. He is the father of my son-in-law, and he is a man of great talent." The crowd looked at me politely. They clapped uncertainly. "You see," Richard continued, "we talk a lot about hard work in this company, but Elijah here knows the real meaning of dirty work. He has spent 40 years mastering the art of the toilet brush. He is a virtuoso of the urinal." A ripple of laughter went through the room. It was nervous laughter at first, then cruel. "And he has passed those skills down," Richard said. "He taught my son everything he knows. That is why Terrence is so good at cleaning up our messes." "Isn't that right, Terrence?" He pointed at my son. The spotlight swung to Terrence. He stood frozen, holding the tray of champagne. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. "Bring us some drinks, boy," Richard commanded. "Your father looks thirsty. Cleaning toilets is thirsty work." The room erupted. They laughed openly now. They laughed at the old janitor in the nice suit. They laughed at the son in the waiter's jacket. They laughed because they thought we were jokes. They thought we were props in Richard's play. I looked at Terrence. He was trembling. A single glass tipped on his tray and shattered on the floor. The sound was like a gunshot. Cleaning up on aisle 4, Richard shouted. More laughter. I did not laugh. I did not cry. I did not run up to the stage and strangle him. I reached into the inner pocket of my $5,000 jacket. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out a thick red industrial grease marker, the kind used by inspectors to mark condemned structures. I uncapped it. The smell of the solvent was sharp and chemical. I turned my back on the stage. I walked to the nearest structural pillar. It was wrapped in decorative faux marble. I looked at the base. I saw the water damage seeping up from the floor disguised by fresh paint. I drew a large red X on the pillar. The laughter died down slightly. People whispered, "What is he doing?" I walked to the ventilation duct on the wall. I saw the black dust around the rim. Mold spores. Toxic. I drew a large red X on the wall. I walked to the bar. The bartender stared at me. I looked at the sink. I saw the drain pipe. It was lead. It was illegal. It was poisoning every glass of water served in this building. I drew a red X on this bar counter. Richard's voice boomed over the speakers. "Hey, what do you think you are doing?" I ignored him. I walked to the window. I looked at the sealant. It was cheap. It was leaking thermal gases. X. I walked to the fire exit. I checked the pressure gauge. It was broken. X. I was moving fast now, efficient. I was a man who had inspected 10,000 buildings. I saw the rot beneath the gilding. I saw the death beneath the luxury. Richard jumped off the stage. He marched toward me. His face was purple. "Stop it," he screamed. "You are ruining my walls. You senile old fool. Did you forget your coloring book?" He grabbed my arm. "This isn't a bathroom, Elijah. You don't scrub these walls. You don't mark them up. Security, get this crazy old man out of here. He has lost his mind." Paige was there too. She looked horrified. Not because of the safety violations, but because I was embarrassing her. "Oh my God," she hissed. "He is having an episode. He thinks he is at work. Get him out of here, Daddy. He is ruining the gala." The crowd parted. They looked at me with pity and disgust. They saw a crazy old janitor vandalizing a ballroom. I shook Richard's hand off my arm. I did not shove him. I just removed him like a piece of lint. I capped the marker. I turned to face him. The room was silent. "I am not drawing, Richard," I said. My voice was calm. It carried to the back of the room without a microphone. "I am grading you." "Grading me," Richard sputtered. "You are vandalizing private property. You are going to jail." "No," I said. "I am citing you." I pointed to the pillar. Class 3 water damage indicating structural rot in the foundation. Violation of City Code 402. I pointed to the vent. Black mold accumulation in the HVAC intake. Violation of Health Code 119. Severe respiratory hazard. I pointed to the bar. Lead piping in a food service area. Violation of Federal Safety Regulation 88. Immediate shutdown required. Richard stared at me. His mouth opened and closed. "How do you know those codes?" he whispered. "Because I wrote them," I said. I reached into my pocket again. I pulled out a leather wallet. I flipped it open. A gold badge gleamed under the lights. It wasn't a police badge. It was something rarer. "I am Elijah Freeman," I said. "I am the chairman of the National Industrial Sanitation Association. I sit on the board that writes the safety protocols for every commercial building in this state. And I own Freeman Sanitation, the company that processes your waste, your water, and your air." I looked around the room. I looked at the mayor. I looked at the senators. "Gentlemen," I said, "you are breathing toxic mold spores. You are drinking lead-contaminated water. And you are standing in a building that is structurally unsound." The mayor dropped his glass. I turned back to Richard. "You called me a janitor, Richard. You are right. I am a janitor. And I just found a lot of trash in this building." I held up the red marker. "Starting with you." Richard looked at the red X's. He looked at the badge. He looked at me. For the first time all night, he looked small, but he was not defeated yet. He was a rat, and rats bite when they are cornered. He laughed. A desperate, high-pitched sound. "You are lying," he said. "You are a fraud. You stole that badge. You are nobody." He turned to the crowd. "Do not listen to him. He is Terrence's father. He is trying to extort me. Security, throw him out." 2 security guards stepped forward. They were big men. They looked uncertain. I did not move. I looked at the guards. "Check your paychecks, boys," I said. "Look at the signature at the bottom. Freeman Holdings processes the payroll for the security firm you work for. I bought the contract this morning." The guards stopped. They looked at each other. "If you touch me," I said, "you are fired. If you escort Mr. Harrington out of his own building, you get a raise." The guards looked at Richard. They looked at me. They saw the suit. They saw the confidence, and they knew who the real boss was. They stepped back. Richard stood alone in the center of the circle. The red X's surrounded him like a target. "You have 5 minutes to evacuate this building," I said to the room. "After that, I am sealing the doors for emergency decontamination." Panic rippled through the crowd. The mayor was the first to move. He ran for the exit. The senators followed. The investors scrambled. In 60 seconds, the ballroom was a chaotic stampede of expensive shoes and screaming elites. Only 4 people remained. Me, Richard, Paige, and Terrence. Terrence was still holding the tray. He was staring at me like I had just descended from the sky. "Dad," he whispered. "Put the tray down, son," I said. He dropped it. The crash was the final note of the symphony I had just conducted. I looked at Richard. He was shaking. "You ruined my party," he whispered. "I am just getting started," I said. I took out my phone. I dialed Sarah. "Execute the buy order," I said. I hung up. I walked over to Terrence. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Go get changed, son," I said. "We have work to do." "But Dad," Terrence said. He looked at Richard. "He is going to fire me." "He cannot fire you," I said. "Why not?" "Because he doesn't work here anymore," I said. I turned to Richard. "Get out of my building, Richard, and take your daughter with you. I have to clean up the mess you made." Richard looked at me with pure hate, but he also looked at me with fear. He turned and ran after his guests. Paige ran after him, her heels clicking on the marble floor like the ticking of a clock that had just run out of time. I stood there in the empty ballroom. The red X's glowed on the walls. I took the marker. I walked to the portrait of Richard Harrington hanging in the lobby. I drew one final X across his face. The banquet was over. Now the wolves would starve. The red X's on the walls were glowing like neon signs of doom. But Richard Harrington was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals attack the weakest thing in the room. He saw his guests looking at the exits. He saw his empire crumbling. He needed a distraction. He needed to shift the disgust of the crowd from him to us. He needed a scapegoat. He signaled to a woman standing near the front of the stage. I recognized her from the dossier Sarah had compiled. Mrs. Eleanor Vanderhoven. She was Richard's biggest investor and a woman known for her cruelty as much as her diamonds. She caught Richard's eye and nodded. It was a subtle movement, a predator's agreement. Terrence was backing away, his head down, trying to make himself invisible. He was holding the empty tray against his chest like a shield. Mrs. Vanderhoven stepped directly into his path. She moved with a speed that belied her age. As Terrence turned, she thrust her glass of red wine forward. She didn't stumble. She threw it. The dark liquid splashed across the front of her silver-sequined gown. It looked like a gunshot wound. She screamed. It was a high, piercing sound that silenced the murmuring crowd. "You clumsy idiot," she shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at my son. "Look what you did! This is a couture Valentino. It is one of a kind." Richard was there in a second. He grabbed Terrence by the lapel of his white jacket and hauled him into the center of the spotlight. "Look at this!" Richard bellowed to the room. "I try to give this boy a chance. I try to lift him out of the gutter, and this is how he repays me. He destroys property. He disrespects our honored guests." Terrence was shaking. "I didn't do it, Richard. She walked into me, I swear." "Do not lie to me, boy," Richard spat. He turned to Mrs. Vanderhoven. "How much was the dress, Eleanor?" $10,000, she said, "and it is ruined. I want him arrested. I want him in jail." Richard looked at Terrence with a smile that was all teeth. "You heard her. $10,000. Do you have $10,000, Terrence? Can you pay for the damage you caused?" "No," Terrence whispered. "You know I don't." "Then you have two choices," Richard said. His voice dropped to a menacing growl that carried through the silent ballroom. "You can go to jail for destruction of property, or you can get on your knees right now and lick it off." The room gasped. It was a sound of pure shock. Even the jaded elites were stunned by the cruelty. "Clean it up," Richard commanded, pointing at the hem of the woman's dress. "Show us how good you are at cleaning. Show us that Freeman talent. If you get that stain out, I won't call the police." Terrence looked at me. His eyes were wide pools of terror. He looked at Paige. She was standing by her father, her arms crossed, looking bored. "Do it, Terrence," she said. "Do not embarrass me anymore. Just clean the dress." My son began to lower himself. His knees bent. He was going to do it. He was going to degrade himself in front of the entire city to save himself from a threat that wasn't even real. He was broken. That was when I moved. I did not run. I walked. My steps were heavy, rhythmic pounding against the marble floor like the tolling of a bell. "Stand up, son," I said. Terrence froze halfway to the floor. I stepped between him and Richard. I stood toe to toe with the man who thought he owned the world. I smelled the scotch on his breath. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead. "How much?" I asked. Richard blinked. "Excuse me." "The dress," I said. "How much?" $10,000, Richard said. "Cash. Right now. Or he goes to jail." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I bypassed the silk lining and reached into the hidden pouch where I kept my emergency fund. I pulled out a stack of bills. They were bound with a thick rubber band. The edges were frayed. The paper was soft from use. It looked like money that had been worked for, money that had seen sweat and dirt. There was exactly $10,000 in that stack. I tossed it. I didn't hand it to him. I threw it. The brick of cash hit Richard in the chest with a dull thud and fell to the floor at his feet. "Paid in full," I said. Richard looked at the money. He looked at me. He sneered. "Where did you get that, Elijah? Rob a liquor store on the way over? Or did you save up your tips for 40 years? "It doesn't matter where it came from," I said. "It spends the same. Now pick it up." "I am not picking up your dirty money," Richard said. "Then leave it there," I said. "But the debt is paid. My son owes you nothing." I reached into my other pocket. "But you," I said, "you owe me a great deal." I pulled out a document. It was a single sheet of paper folded in thirds. The letterhead was blue. The seal was gold. It was a Level 1 environmental violation notice issued by the State Board of Health. I slapped it against his chest. He grabbed it reflexively. "What is this?" he demanded. "Read it," I said. He unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the lines. His face went pale, then red. This says you are shutting me down. Immediate cessation of operations. Toxic hazard." "That is correct," I said. Richard laughed. A loud barking sound. He ripped the paper in half, then he ripped it again. He threw the confetti pieces into my face. "You are a joke, Elijah. This is paper. Just paper. You have no authority. You have no power. You are a janitor with a printed form. No one cares what you think. No one is watching." He looked around the room, spreading his arms wide. "Look at these people. They are my friends. They are my investors. They know who I am, and they know who you are. You are nobody." The pieces of paper drifted down to the floor, landing on the stack of cash. "Is that so?" I asked. I reached up to my lapel. There was a small silver pin there shaped like a broom. It looked like a cheap piece of jewelry. I tapped it. A tiny red light blinked once. "You are right, Richard," I said. "I am a nobody, but the 50,000 people watching this live stream right now might disagree." Richard froze. "What?" "I am streaming, Richard," I said. My voice was calm, cold. "I have been streaming since I walked in the door. The camera is in the pin. The audio is crystal clear." I pointed to the phone in Terrence's hand, which I had texted moments before instructing him to open the feed. Terrence held the screen up. On the screen was Richard's face twisted in rage, and next to it was a waterfall of comments. The chat was moving so fast it was a blur. "Criminal. Monster. Shut him down. I hope he rots. Justice for the janitor." "You just tore up a federal notice on live video," I said. "That is a felony, Richard. Tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, and you did it in front of the mayor." I looked over at the mayor, who was trying to edge toward the door. "Did you see that, Mr. Mayor?" I asked. The mayor looked at Richard. He looked at the camera pin on my lapel. He looked at the angry comments scrolling on the screen. "I saw everything Mr. Freeman," the mayor said quickly. "I will be launching an inquiry first thing in the morning." Richard looked around the room. The faces had changed. They weren't looking at him with admiration anymore. They were looking at him like he was a contagion. They were pulling out their own phones, backing away, checking their stock portfolios. "You set me up," Richard whispered. His voice was trembling. "I didn't set you up," I said. "I just turned on the lights. The roaches did the rest." Paige stepped forward. Her face was a mask of fury. "Turn it off. Turn it off right now, you old freak. You are ruining our reputation." I looked at her. I looked at her flat stomach beneath the silk dress. "Your reputation was ruined the moment you decided to lie about a baby that doesn't exist," I said. Paige went white. She covered her stomach with her hands instinctively. How do you—" The chat went wild. "No baby. Fake pregnancy." "What is he talking about?" I tapped the pin again. "Smile, Paige," I said. "You are trending." Richard lunged at me. He lost all control. He swung a fist, wild and desperate. I didn't move. I didn't have to. Two men in dark suits stepped out from the crowd. They intercepted Richard before he could touch me. They were my private security team disguised as guests. They held him back easily. "Get your hands off me," Richard screamed. "I am Richard Harrington. I own this city." "Not anymore," I said. I leaned in close so only he could hear me. The microphone picked it up perfectly. I bought your debt, Richard. I bought your mortgage. I bought your car notes. I bought your credit lines. I picked up a piece of the torn paper from the floor, and I own the ground you were standing on. I turned to Terrence. Come on, son, we are leaving. Terrence looked at me. He looked at the cash on the floor. He looked at his wife, who was shaking with rage and fear. He took off the white jacket. He let it drop to the floor. It landed on the money covering Richard's shoes. I am coming, Dad, Terrence said. We walked out of the ballroom together. The silence behind us was broken only by the sound of Richard screaming my name and the relentless notification pings of 50,000 people sharing his downfall. The legal strike had landed, and it was fatal. The next morning, the city woke up to a digital earthquake. The live stream from the gala had been clipped, shared, and reposted 100,000 times. Justice for the Janitor was trending #1 in the state. The video of Richard ripping up the federal violation notice was playing on loop on the morning news. Analysts were already talking about a dip in Harrington Logistics stock. It wasn't a crash yet, but the sharks were smelling blood in the water. I sat in my office at Freeman Sanitation headquarters. It was a modest room for a CEO, but it had everything I needed. Banks of monitors showed me the pulse of the city's waste systems. And right now, they showed me the pulse of Richard's downfall. My phone buzzed. It was Terrence. Dad, he said. His voice was tight. Paige is going crazy. She saw the news. She is blaming me. Where are you? I asked. I am at home. I went back to get my things. I can't stay here anymore. Not after last night. Get your things and get out, Terrence. Do not engage with her. I am trying, Dad, but she is throwing my clothes on the lawn. I stood up. I am coming over. No, Dad, please. If you come here, it will only make it worse. Just let me grab my stuff. I will meet you at the office. Stay on the phone, son. Keep the line open. I heard the sound of glass breaking in the background. Then Paige's voice screaming. It was a shrill, animalistic sound. You ruined everything. You and your garbage father. Look at this. My friends are unfollowing me. Brands are canceling my sponsorship deals. I am losing followers by the second. She wasn't worried about her father's company. She wasn't worried about the legal violations. She was worried about her Instagram metrics. It is not my fault, Paige Terrence said calmly. His voice was steady for the first time in years. You lied. Your father lied. Don't you dare talk about my father. She screamed. He is a genius. He built this city. Your father is just a cockroach, a roach that crawled out of the sewer to ruin our lives. I heard a thud, like a suitcase hitting the floor. Get out, Paige yelled. Get out of my house. I never want to see you again. I am leaving, Terrence said. I just need my box. What box? The box from the closet. With my mom's things. Oh, that old junk. Paige laughed. It was a cruel sound. You mean the trash? I already took care of it? What do you mean? Terrence asked. His voice dropped. Panic seeped into his tone. Where is it, Paige? I heard footsteps, the sound of a door opening, the rush of wind. They were on the balcony. Look down, Paige said. There was a silence, then a cry of anguish from my son that tore my heart in two. No, I ran to the elevator. I didn't care what Terrence said. I was going to him. I drove my SUV like a man possessed. I broke every speed limit. I ran red lights. I needed to get to the Meridian Tower before she destroyed him completely. When I pulled up to the curb, I saw it. The lawn in front of the building was littered with clothes. Shirts, pants, ties. They were scattered like debris from a plane crash. And in the center of the lawn, a small fire was burning. Terrence was on his knees in the grass. He wasn't praying. He was digging through the flames with his bare hands. He was screaming. Mom. Mom. I jumped out of the car. I ran to him. He was holding a burning picture frame. The glass was cracked and blackened. The photo inside was curling, turning to ash. It was the only photo we had of his mother, my late wife, Sarah, taken on our wedding day. She was smiling, holding a bouquet of daisies. Terrence was trying to pat the flames out with his hands. His palms were blistering. He didn't feel it. He was sobbing, racking, heaving sobs that shook his whole body. She burned it, Dad. She burned Mom. I grabbed his wrists. Let it go, son. It is gone. No. He fought me. He tried to dive back into the fire. I have to save her. I pulled him back. I wrapped my arms around him. I held him while he screamed his mother's name. Up on the balcony, 4 stories above us, Paige was watching. She was leaning over the railing, holding a lighter. She was smiling. Oops, she called down. Must have dropped it. Clumsy me. Terrence looked up. His face was streaked with soot and tears. His eyes were red raw. But then the grief in his eyes changed. It hardened. It turned into something cold and dangerous. He broke free from my grip. He stood up. He looked at the balcony. "You evil bitch," he screamed. He ran for the building entrance. "Terrence, no," I shouted. But he was already gone. He burst through the lobby doors, pushing past the doorman. I chased after him. I was 68 years old, but fear gave me speed. I knew what he was going to do. I knew what happened when a gentle man finally snapped. I caught the next elevator. I watched the numbers tick up. 2, 3, 4. When the doors opened, I heard screaming coming from apartment 4B. I ran down the hall. The door was open. Terrence was standing in the living room. Paige was backed against the glass doors to the balcony. She looked terrified now. The smugness was gone. She was facing a man she didn't recognize. "You burned her," Terrence yelled. He was advancing on her. His hands were clenched into fists. His burned palms were bleeding, dripping onto the white carpet. "Stay back," Paige shrieked. "Stay away from me." "Why?" Terrence screamed. "Why would you do that? She never hurt you. She was a saint. She was nothing," Paige yelled back, trying to regain her ground. "She was a poor nobody, just like you. And now she is ash, just like your future." Terrence lunged. He didn't hit her. He didn't strike her face. He shoved her. He pushed her shoulders hard. "Get away from me," he roared. Paige stumbled backward. She hit the glass door frame. She lost her footing. She fell. It wasn't a hard fall. She landed on her bottom on the plush rug. It was a stumble, a trip, but the moment she hit the floor, she started screaming. It was a blood-curdling sound. "My baby. My baby. You killed my baby." She clutched her stomach. She curled into a ball, writhing on the floor. "Help me. He hurt the baby. I am losing it." Terrence froze. The rage vanished instantly, replaced by absolute horror. He looked at his hands. He looked at his wife screaming on the floor. "Oh God," he whispered. "Oh God, what did I do?" He dropped to his knees beside her. "Paige, no. I didn't mean to. I am sorry. Please. Is the baby okay? Get away from me, murderer," she screamed, kicking at him. "You killed him. I can feel it." Terrence scrambled back. He was hyperventilating. He was having a panic attack. He thought he had just murdered his own child. He thought he was a monster. He looked at me as I entered the room. "Dad, help her. Call 911. I killed the baby." I looked at Paige. She was putting on the performance of a lifetime. She was sobbing, rocking back and forth, clutching her belly. But I saw her eyes. For a split second she looked at me, and in her eyes I saw triumph. She had won. She had broken him again. She had turned him back into the slave. She was going to use this. She was going to fake the miscarriage right now. She was going to blame it on his violence. She was going to send him to prison for domestic abuse and manslaughter of an unborn child. It was the perfect trap, and she was smiling behind her hands. I walked over to Terrence. I grabbed him by the shoulders. I hauled him to his feet. "Stop it, Terrence," I said. "Dad, we have to help her. The baby." "There is no baby," I said. Terrence looked at me confused. "What? There is no baby. Son. She is lying. He hurts me." Paige screamed louder, trying to drown me out. "He is crazy. He is trying to kill me." I let go of Terrence. I walked toward Paige. She flinched. "Don't touch me." I didn't touch her. I reached for the cane I had started carrying recently, more for style than necessity. It was a solid oak walking stick with a silver handle. I stood over her. "Get up, Paige," I said. "The show is over." She looked up at me, hatred burning in her eyes. "You go to hell, old man. You and your murderer son." She groaned again, a theatrical sound of agony. My stomach. The pain. I looked at her stomach. The silk dress was bunched up around her waist. I lifted the cane. "Dad, what are you doing?" Terrence shouted. I swung the cane. Not hard, not to hurt, but with precision. I hooked the hem of her dress with the tip of the cane, and I pulled. The fabric tore. Buttons popped. And there it was. Strapped to her torso with thick Velcro bands was a mound of pink silicone. It was dented where she had fallen on it. The room went silent. Terrence stared. He blinked. He couldn't process what he was seeing. "What is that?" he whispered. Paige scrambled backward, trying to cover it, trying to pull her dress down. "Don't look at me!" she screamed. I used the cane again. I prodded the silicone belly. It dimpled. It didn't feel like flesh. It felt like rubber. "It is a pillow, son," I said. A $3,000 theatrical prosthetic, but it is just a pillow. Terrence walked forward slowly. He looked like a man walking through a dream, or a nightmare. He reached out. His hand was trembling. Paige tried to slap his hand away, but he caught her wrist. He held it tight. He touched the belly. He pushed his finger into the silicone. It wasn't warm. It didn't move. There was no heartbeat. He looked at Paige. His eyes were empty. "You lied," he said. It was a whisper. Paige stopped crying. She stopped screaming. She saw that the game was up. She saw that there was no way out. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She attacked. "Yeah, I lied," she spat. "So what? You think I would let you breed with me? You think I would ruin my body for a janitor? I needed the insurance, Terrence. I needed the leverage. And you were so desperate to be a daddy you believed anything." She laughed. A cold, hard sound. "You are pathetic. You scrubbed toilets for a piece of rubber." Terrence let go of her wrist. He stood up. He backed away. He looked at the silicone belly. Then he looked at his burned hands. Hands that had tried to save his mother's picture. Hands that had worked until they bled for a child that didn't exist. He started to laugh. It was a dry, broken sound. He looked at me. "You knew, Dad." I nodded. "I found out yesterday. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," I said. "You had to feel it." Terrence nodded slowly. He looked at Paige one last time. She was sitting on the floor adjusting the straps of her fake belly, looking annoyed rather than ashamed. "You are right, Paige," he said. "I am pathetic." He turned to me. "Let's go, Dad. I am done here." We walked out of the apartment. We left her sitting there on the floor, surrounded by her lies. We took the elevator down in silence. When we got to the lobby, Terrence stopped. He looked at his hands. "I am free," he said. "Yes, son," I said. "You are free." But the war wasn't over. Richard was still out there, and Paige would not go quietly. They would strike back, and I was ready. I had the debt. I had the building. And now I had my son back. The escalation was over. Now it was time for the execution. We tried to walk away with what was left of our dignity, but Paige was not done with us yet. She followed us out of the apartment, screaming like a banshee. She chased us down the hall and into the elevator, dragging her torn dress around her. She was desperate. She knew she had lost Terrence in private, so she decided to destroy him in public. By the time we reached the lobby, a crowd had gathered. The tenants of the Meridian Tower had been drawn downstairs by the sight of burning clothes on the lawn and the arrival of the fire department. There were neighbors in bathrobes, security guards, and onlookers from the street. They were watching the smoke rise from the ashes of my wife's photograph. When the elevator doors opened, Paige pushed past us. She ran into the center of the lobby and threw herself onto the marble floor. She wailed. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "Help me," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Terrence. "He beat me. He killed our baby." He punched me in the stomach until it stopped moving. The crowd gasped. I saw the security guards reach for their radios. I saw neighbors pull out their phones to record. They looked at my son with pure hatred. They saw a large man and a crying woman on the floor. They saw a monster. Terrence froze. The color drained from his face. He looked at the angry faces surrounding him. He looked at the security guards stepping forward, hands hovering over their weapons. "I did not touch her," Terrence whispered. His voice was too quiet. No one heard him. "He is a murderer," Paige shrieked, tearing at her hair. "Arrest him. Do not let him leave." A large man in a tracksuit stepped forward, blocking our path to the door. "You are not going anywhere, buddy," the man growled. I felt the temperature in the room drop. This was it, the final trap. If the police arrived now, they would arrest Terrence based on the testimony of a grieving mother and a hostile crowd. He would be in a cell before he could explain. His life would be over. I could not let that happen. I could not let the lie stand for one more second. I stepped in front of Terrence. I gripped my oak cane. It was heavy, solid wood. I looked at Paige, writhing on the floor, playing the victim with terrifying skill. I looked at the silicone strap peeking out from the torn neckline of her dress. She was so confident in her deception she thought she was untouchable. I did not say a word. I did not argue with the angry neighbors. I stepped forward. Paige looked up at me, her eyes flashing with triumph. She thought I was coming to beg. She thought I was coming to apologize. She was wrong. I raised the cane. The silver handle caught the light of the chandelier. I didn't swing it to hit her. I swung it with surgical precision. The tip of the cane hooked the jagged tear in her silk dress, the one I had started upstairs. I twisted my wrist and pulled. I pulled with all the strength of a man who had hauled steel trash cans for 40 years. The expensive fabric ripped with a sound like a gunshot. The buttons flew across the lobby floor. The dress fell open, completely exposing the torso underneath. And then gravity took over. The silicone belly, which had been loosened during the struggle upstairs, lost its final anchor. The heavy Velcro straps gave way. The prosthetic mound of pink rubber slid down her body. It didn't look like skin. It looked like a slab of raw meat manufactured in a factory. It tumbled out from under the ruined dress. It hit the polished marble floor with a wet, hollow slap that echoed off the high ceiling. It bounced once and rolled, coming to a stop at the feet of the man in the tracksuit. The silence that descended on the lobby was absolute. It was a vacuum. Everyone stared. The security guards froze. The neighbors lowered their phones. The man in the tracksuit looked down at the object by his sneakers. It was a pillow, a high-end medical-grade silicone pillow painted to look like a pregnant stomach. It lay there dead and absurd under the harsh lobby lights. Paige stopped screaming mid-breath. She looked down at her flat stomach exposed to the world. She looked at the rubber lie lying on the floor. For the first time in her life, she had no words. There was no spin. There was no manipulation. The evidence was right there, physical and undeniable. One of the neighbors, a young woman with a stroller, walked closer. She looked at the prosthetic. She looked at Paige. "It is fake," she whispered. Her voice carried in the silence. "There is no baby." The realization rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. I watched the faces change. The anger that had been directed at my son evaporated, replaced by confusion, then disgust. They realized they had been played. They realized they had been weaponized by a liar. "Oh my God," someone muttered. "She faked it. She faked the whole thing." Paige scrambled to cover herself, crossing her arms over her chest. She looked around, wild-eyed, searching for an ally, searching for someone who would still believe her. But there was no one. The illusion was shattered. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a psychopath. The man in the tracksuit stepped back from her as if she were contagious. "You sick lady!" he spat. "You nearly got this guy killed." I looked at the silicone belly one last time. I poked it with my cane. It wobbled. "Pick up your trash, Paige," I said. My voice was cold steel. "We do not litter in my building." Then I turned to my son. Terrence was staring at the floor. He was staring at the fake belly. He had seen it upstairs, but seeing it here in the open under the eyes of strangers broke something final inside him. The public nature of the lie made it real in a way the private revelation had not. He saw the horror in the neighbor's eyes, and he realized that for months he had been the punchline to a joke he didn't know was being told. He let out a sound that I will never forget. It wasn't a word. It was a guttural roar of pure agony. It was the sound of a man whose soul was being ripped out through his throat. "No," he screamed. He fell to his knees. He didn't care about the suit. He didn't care about the crowd. He grabbed his head in his hands and screamed until his voice cracked. He screamed for the nights he had spent talking to a stomach that wasn't there. He screamed for the crib he had built with his own hands. He screamed for the name he had picked out. He screamed for the slave he had become. I knelt beside him. I wrapped my arms around his heaving shoulders. I held him tight, just like I had held him when he was a boy and scraped his knee. But I couldn't kiss this boo-boo away. This wound was deep. "It is okay, son," I whispered. "Let it out. It is over." "I was a slave," Terrence sobbed. He clutched my jacket. I scrubbed their floors. "Dad, I thanked them for it. I thanked them for letting me be a slave because I thought I was a father. I thought I was protecting my family. You were protecting a lie," I said. "But you are awake now." He looked up at me. His face was a mask of tragedy. Tears and snot ran down his face. He looked at Paige, who was now weeping silently, huddled on the floor, trying to hide her nakedness. Why, he yelled at her. "Why did you do it?" Paige didn't answer. She just glared at the floor, her hate radiating off her like heat waves. "Come on, Terrence," I said. I stood up and pulled him with me. He was heavy dead weight, but I hauled him up. "We are leaving. This place is poison." I guided him toward the doors. The crowd parted for us. They didn't speak. They lowered their heads in shame. They knew they had almost participated in a lynching. The security guards opened the doors for us, their eyes fixed on the ground. We walked out into the cool night air. The fire on the lawn had burned out, leaving a black scorch mark on the grass. The smell of smoke hung in the air, mixing with the city exhaust. My driver was waiting. He opened the back door of the SUV. I pushed Terrence inside. He slumped against the leather seat, his eyes vacant. I climbed in beside him. "Drive," I said. As the car pulled away, I looked back at the Meridian Tower. I saw the lights of the lobby. I saw the small figure of Paige, alone on the floor, surrounded by strangers who looked at her with revulsion. She had wanted a stage. She had wanted an audience. She got one. I turned to my son. He was looking at his hands again. "I am sorry, Dad," he whispered. "Do not apologize," I said. "You survived. That is all that matters." "Now," I said, reaching for my phone, "we finish this." I dialed Sarah. "It is done," I said. "The fraud is public. The police will be there in 10 minutes to take statements from the witnesses. Paige Harrington is finished." "Good," Sarah said. "And Richard?" "Richard is next," I said. I looked at Terrence. He was broken, but he was free. Now I had to make sure the people who broke him could never hurt anyone else again. "Take us to the office," I told the driver. "I have a company to dismantle." The sun had barely risen over my modest brick house in the suburbs when the wolves came knocking. I was in the kitchen frying bacon and eggs for my son. Terrence was sitting at the small wooden table staring into a cup of black coffee. He had not slept. His eyes were red-rimmed and haunted by the image of the silicone belly lying on the lobby floor. He looked like a man who had survived a plane crash only to find himself stranded on a desert island. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly ring. It was sharp and insistent. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked to the door. I saw a man in a cheap windbreaker standing on my porch. He held a thick manila envelope. "Elijah Freeman?" the man asked. "That is me," I said. "And is Terrence Freeman present?" I did not answer. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. "What is this about?" I asked. The man didn't blink. He thrust the envelope into my chest. "You have been served," he said. "Both of you. Have a nice day." He turned and walked away, getting into a rusted sedan. I looked down at the envelope. It was heavy. It felt like a brick. I opened it right there on the porch. I scanned the first page. It was a civil summons. The plaintiff was Richard Harrington. The defendant was Terrence Freeman. The charges were assault battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Richard was claiming that Terrence's physical attack on Paige had caused her severe psychological trauma resulting in a stress-induced medical episode. He was claiming that my son was violent and unstable. He was claiming that I, Elijah Freeman, was an accessory to the assault. But it was the number at the bottom of the page that made me stop. Damages sought $5 million. I walked back into the kitchen and tossed the packet on the table next to the eggs. "What is that?" Terrence asked. He flinched as the heavy paper hit the wood. "It is a love letter from your father-in-law," I said. "He is suing you." Terrence picked up the papers. His hand shook so hard the pages rattled. He read the charges. His face went from pale to gray. $5 million, he whispered. "Dad, he wants $5 million. I don't have $5. Why would he do this? He knows I am broke. He knows you are broke," I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "But he thinks I am not." Terrence looked up confused. "What do you mean?" "Last night I threw $10,000 in cash at his feet," I said. Richard saw that. He saw the gold card I showed the police. He saw the confidence. He smells money, Terrence. He is a predator. He thinks I am a drug dealer or a lottery winner hiding a stash. He doesn't care about the assault. He knows the pregnancy was fake. This is a shakedown. He is desperate for cash, and he thinks he can squeeze it out of us by threatening to put you in prison for battery. Terrence dropped his head into his hands. "I am going to jail," he sobbed. I pushed her dad. "There were witnesses. They will say I attacked a woman. I am finished." "You are not finished," I said. I grabbed his shoulder and squeezed it hard. "Get dressed, son. Put on your suit." "Why?" Terrence asked. "Are we going to find a lawyer?" "No," I said. "We already have a lawyer. We are going to the bank." We drove to the financial district in silence. Terrence looked out the window, watching the city pass by. He looked like a man on his way to his own funeral. He couldn't see a way out. He only saw the crushing weight of the legal system bearing down on him. He didn't know that the legal system runs on money, and I had more fuel than Richard Harrington could ever imagine. We pulled up to a glass skyscraper that reflected the morning clouds. It wasn't the bank where I kept my checking account. It was the headquarters of Sarah's firm. We took the private elevator to the penthouse suite. Sarah was waiting for us in the conference room. She had a team of 3 paralegals with her. The table was covered in files. "Good morning, Mr. Freeman," Sarah said. She didn't look at my suit. She looked at my eyes. She saw the fire there. "Sarah, this is my son Terrence," I said. Terrence shook her hand weakly. He was intimidated by the room. He was intimidated by the view. He was intimidated by the woman in the $3,000 power suit. "Mr. Freeman," Sarah said, sliding a document across the table. "We received a copy of the lawsuit this morning electronically." Richard moved fast. He filed an emergency motion to freeze Terrence's assets. "He has no assets," I said, sitting down at the head of the table. "He has future wages," Sarah noted. "They can garnish him for the rest of his life. Richard wants to make him a slave forever." Terrence put his head on the table. "We need a defense strategy," Sarah said. "We can argue self-defense. We can bring up the fake pregnancy to damage Paige's credibility. We can drag this out for years." "No," I said. Sarah paused. "No. I do not want a defense," I said. I leaned forward. "Defense implies we are being attacked. I am done being attacked. I want to go on the offensive." "What do you have in mind, sir?" "I want you to buy his debt," I said. Sarah blinked. "All of it. Every single cent," I said. "I want the mortgage on his penthouse. I want the business loans for Harrington Logistics. I want his personal credit card debt. I want the loan on his yacht. I want his gambling debts if you can find a broker to sell them." Sarah tapped her pen on the table. She did the math in her head. She was brilliant. "Harrington Logistics is leveraged to the hilt," she said. "Richard has been borrowing against the company to pay for his lifestyle. The banks are nervous. His credit rating just took a hit after your live stream stunt. The debt is distressed. We can probably pick it up for 60 cents on the dollar." "Do it," I said. "Offer them 50. They will take it to get it off their books." "But," Sir Sarah said, looking at Terrence, then back at me, "we are talking about a significant capital outlay. The corporate debt alone is in the millions. His personal liabilities are another $3 million. You are looking at a total exposure of roughly $12 million. Terrence lifted his head. $12 million, he repeated. He looked at me like I was insane. "Dad, what are you talking about? You don't have $12 million. You have a pension." I ignored him. I kept my eyes on Sarah. "Can we do it by close of business today?" I asked. "If the funds are verified, yes," Sarah said. "But Mr. Freeman, I have to ask, are you sure you want to liquidate the trust positions? That portfolio is performing at 12%. "Liquidate them," I said. "Dad, stop," Terrence shouted. He stood up. "This has gone too far. You are talking about monopoly money. You are going to get us in trouble. Fraud. This is fraud, right? You are pretending to be a billionaire to scare Richard. It won't work. He will know." I looked at my son. It was time. He had suffered enough in the dark. "Sit down, Terrence," I said. He remained standing, shaking his head. "No, I am not going to let you go to jail for me. I am going to turn myself in. I am going to beg Richard for mercy." "Show him, Sarah," I said. Sarah nodded. She typed a command into her laptop. The large screen at the end of the room flickered to life. It showed a bank account summary. The header read, "Freeman Holdings, LLC. Terrence looked at the screen. He squinted. That says $120 million, he whispered. He rubbed his eyes. He looked again. "Dad," he said. His voice was faint. "Is this real?" "It is real," I said. "But how?" "You cleaned toilets. You fixed sinks. We lived in a 2-bedroom house. You drove a used Ford. I did clean toilets," I said. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at the city. 30 years ago I was working a contract at a chemical plant, I said. They had a problem. Their waste filtration system was inefficient. It was clogging up, costing them millions in downtime. I saw the problem. It wasn't the chemicals. It was the filter matrix. I turned back to Terrence. "I tinkered with it in my garage, son. At night while you were sleeping. I built a new kind of filter using a nanocarbon mesh. It didn't just strain the waste, it neutralized it at the molecular level. I patented it," I said. Sarah brought up another slide. It showed a technical schematic. United States Patent Office. Freeman Nanofiltration System. I sold the license to the military, I said. Every nuclear submarine in the Navy uses my filters to process their waste. Every field hospital in the Army uses my system to purify their water. I make $3 on every filter sold, I said, and they buy millions of them every year. Terrence sat down heavily. He looked like he had been hit by a truck. "You are rich," he said. I am wealthy, I corrected. Rich is what Richard thinks he is. Rich is loud. Wealth is quiet. Why didn't you tell me, he asked. His voice was full of hurt. I struggled, Dad. I ate ramen noodles. I worried about rent. I scrubbed floors for Richard because I was terrified of being poor. And you had this. I walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder. I wanted you to build your own character, Terrence. I wanted you to know what it meant to work. I saw what money did to people who didn't earn it. I saw how it made them soft. I didn't want that for you. I paused. But I made a mistake. I let you struggle too long. I let you believe that your value was tied to your struggle. I let men like Richard convince you that you were nothing because you had nothing. I gripped his shoulder tight. I am sorry, son. I was trying to protect you from the curse of easy money, but I exposed you to the curse of poverty. Terrence looked up at me. He had tears in his eyes again, but these were different. They weren't tears of shame, they were tears of relief and awe. You invented the filter, he said. The Navy uses it. I nodded. You are a genius, Dad. I am a janitor who pays attention, I said. I turned back to Sarah. Buy the debt, I said. I want to own Richard Harrington by sunset. I want to be the one he writes his check to at the end of the month. And when he misses a payment, I want to be the one who takes his keys. Sarah smiled. She tapped her keyboard. Initiating purchase orders now, Mr. Freeman. The banks are going to be very happy to hear from us. I looked at Terrence. Richard wants to sue us for $5 million, I said. By tomorrow morning, he will owe us 20. Let's go get some lunch, son. I know a place that serves a $50 steak, and this time I am paying with my own card. Terrence stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He stood a little taller. He looked at the screen one last time at the number with all the zeros. Okay, Dad, he said. Let's go eat. We walked out of the office. The game had changed. Richard thought he was fighting a peasant. He didn't know he was fighting the king of the kingdom he lived in, and the king was done being merciful. The next morning, the sun rose over a city that Richard Harrington no longer owned. He just did not know it yet. I sat in the command center of my office with Terrence by my side. On the wall of monitors, we were not watching waste disposal routes. We were watching the financial dismemberment of a man who thought he was a god. Sarah had executed the debt purchase at midnight. By 8 in the morning, the banking system had updated. The trap was armed. At 8:15, Richard arrived at his office. We knew this because I had access to his building's security feed. He walked in looking tired but still arrogant. He barked at his assistant. He slammed his door. He thought the worst was over. He thought the viral video was a PR nightmare he could spin. He did not know that the ground beneath his feet had already liquefied. At 8:30, his phone rang. It was the bank. Not his usual friendly account manager who took him golfing. It was the risk management department. We listened in via the speakerphone in Sarah's office. She had legal authorization as the holder of his debt to monitor communications regarding the assets. Mr. Harrington, the voice on the line, said, "This is First National. We have flagged unusual activity on your accounts." "What activity?" Richard snapped. "I am busy. Fix it." "Sir, we have received notice that your primary lender has called in your demand notes. All of them. The mortgage on the Meridian penthouse, the commercial loans for the logistics fleet, the personal line of credit. The total outstanding balance is $12 million. Richard laughed. It was a nervous sound. "You are crazy. Those notes aren't due for years. I have a payment schedule. The notes contain an acceleration clause regarding reputational risk and solvency," the banker said. "Given the events of last night and the pending investigation by the mayor's office, the note holder has exercised their right to demand immediate repayment." "Who is the note holder?" Richard screamed. "I deal with the bank. The debt was sold last night, sir. The new holder is demanding payment within 24 hours. If the funds are not wired by close of business today, we are initiating foreclosure proceedings on the building and seizing all personal assets to cover the liability." Richard stood up. We could see him on the security camera pacing like a caged tiger. 24 hours. I don't have $12 million liquid. You froze my accounts. How am I supposed to pay payroll? Your accounts are frozen pending the resolution of this debt, the banker said. Good luck, Mr. Harrington. The line went dead. Richard slammed the phone down. He threw a vase against the wall. He was hyperventilating. He was watching his life dissolve in real time. He couldn't make payroll. If he missed payroll, his employees would walk. The union would strike. The company would collapse in a day. He needed a miracle. He started making calls. He called his investors. He called Mrs. Vanderhoven. No one answered. They had seen the video. They had seen the red X's. He was toxic. He was radioactive. At 9 o'clock he sat in his chair, his head in his hands. He was weeping. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was the cry of a man who loved money more than he loved his own soul and was watching his God die. I looked at Terrence. "It is time," I said. Sarah stood up. She smoothed her skirt. She picked up her briefcase. "Remember the terms," she said. 51%, I said. "He stays as CEO. We need him to feel like he won. We need him to sign the death warrant thinking it is a treaty." Sarah nodded. "I will call you when the ink is wet." She left the office. I watched on the monitor as she entered the Harrington building. She didn't go to the service entrance. She walked through the front doors. The receptionist tried to stop her, but Sarah flashed a card and kept walking. She took the elevator to the executive floor. She walked into Richard's office without knocking. Richard looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. "Who are you?" "My name is Sarah Jenkins," she said. "I represent a private equity firm that specializes in distressed assets. We heard you are having a liquidity crisis." Richard straightened his tie. He tried to compose himself. He tried to put the mask back on. "We are having a temporary cash flow hiccup," he lied. "Nothing serious, Mr. Harrington," Sarah said, sitting down uninvited. "Your accounts are frozen. Your debt has been called. You have 6 hours before the sheriff arrives to padlock these doors." "That is not a hiccup. That is a heart attack." Richard slumped. "Who sent you?" "My clients prefer to remain anonymous," Sarah said. "They see value in your logistics network. They are willing to bail you out." "How much?" Richard asked. The greed flared in his eyes. $2 million cash injection immediately to cover payroll and unfreeze operations. Plus, we will assume the $12 million debt obligation and restructure it over 10 years. Richard's eyes widened. It was a lifeline. It was salvation. "What do you want?" he asked, suspicious. 51% of the company, Sarah said. "Controlling interest." "No," Richard said, slamming his hand on the desk. "This is my company. I built it. I am not giving up control." "Then you lose it all," Sarah said calmly. She stood up. "The foreclosure notice is already drafted. By tomorrow morning you will be on the street. Your penthouse will be sold at auction. Your yacht will be seized, and your daughter will have to find a real job." Richard flinched at the mention of Paige. He knew she couldn't survive in the real world. "Wait," he said. Sarah stopped at the door. 51% is too much. I need to run this place. I am the face of Harrington Logistics." "We agree," Sarah said. "That is part of the deal. You remain as CEO. You keep your title. You keep your corner office. You keep your salary. My clients are investors, not operators. They want you to keep driving the ship. They just want to own the ocean." Richard paused. He was calculating. He thought he could outsmart them. He thought he could take the money, stay in power, and eventually buy them out. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. "I stay as CEO?" he asked. "In writing." "In writing," Sarah said. She pulled a contract from her briefcase. Richard grabbed it. He flipped through the pages. He saw the $2 million figure. He saw the clause guaranteeing his position as chief executive officer. He saw the salary retention. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who thought he had cheated the hangman. "Where do I sign?" he asked. Sarah handed him a gold pen. It wasn't the cheap one I had bought for Terrence. It was a pen fit for a king signing away his kingdom. Richard signed his name with a flourish. He didn't read page 14. He didn't read the subsection regarding the board of directors. He didn't read the line that said, "The majority shareholder retains the exclusive right to appoint the chairman of the board." And he certainly didn't read the fine print that said, "The chairman of the board holds absolute veto power over all personnel decisions, including the termination of the CEO for cause." He signed. He handed the contract back to Sarah. "Pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Jenkins," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Tell your investors they made a smart choice. I am going to turn this around. That video will blow over. I always win." Sarah put the contract in her bag. "The funds are being wired now," she said. "You can make payroll." Richard laughed. He picked up his phone. He dialed his assistant. "Cindy, get the payroll processor on the line and call the car service. I am going to celebrate." We dodged a bullet. He looked at Sarah. "You can show yourself out." Sarah walked out of the office. She walked down the hall. She got into the elevator. She called me. "He signed," she said. I looked at Terrence. I looked at the monitor showing Richard laughing on the phone. "He thinks he won," I said. "He has no idea," Sarah said. "The board meeting is scheduled for 4 p.m. I stood up. I adjusted my tie. "Terrence, get your coat," I said. "Where are we going, Dad?" "We are going to a board meeting," I said. "But we aren't on the board." "We are the board, son," I said. "I own 51% of Harrington Logistics. I am the majority shareholder, and I am appointing myself chairman." Terrence looked at me. His jaw dropped. "You own the company," he whispered. "I own the company," I said, "and I think it is time for a performance review." We walked out of the office. The sun was setting over the city. It was casting long shadows. But for us, it was the dawn of a new day. Richard Harrington was celebrating in his office, drinking his expensive scotch, thinking he was invincible. He didn't know that the man who scrubbed his floors was coming to take his chair. And this time, I wasn't bringing a mop. I was bringing a gavel. At 4 o'clock precisely, Richard Harrington strode into the boardroom on the 40th floor. He looked like a man who had just cheated death and was ready to brag about it. His suit was fresh, his hair was slicked back, and the smell of expensive scotch followed him like a cloud. He had summoned the entire executive board for an emergency meeting. He had also summoned my son. Terrence stood by the wall near the door. He wasn't wearing the waiter's uniform anymore, but he looked small in the presence of the board members. These were men and women in gray suits who controlled the logistics of the entire state. They looked at Terrence with a mixture of pity and annoyance. They knew he was the source of the recent drama, and in the corporate world, drama was bad for business. Richard sat at the head of the long mahogany table. He didn't sit. He sprawled. He put his feet up on the polished wood, crossing his ankles. He held a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. He looked around the room, making eye contact with every nervous executive. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice booming. "I know we have had a rough 24 hours. There were rumors. There were malicious videos posted by disgruntled low-level employees. There was panic." He took a sip of his drink and smiled. "A shark showing its teeth. But I am happy to report that the ship has been steadied. I have secured a massive injection of private capital. Our liquidity issues are solved. The debt is restructured. We are stronger than ever." The board members relaxed visibly. Shoulders dropped. Breath was exhaled. They didn't care about ethics. They cared about their stock options. If Richard said the money was there, they were happy. However, Richard continued, his eyes snapping toward Terrence. "We cannot ignore the cause of this disruption. We cannot ignore the cancer that tried to rot us from the inside." He pointed a finger at my son. "Terrence Freeman, stand forward." Terrence stepped away from the wall. He kept his head up this time. He remembered what I told him. "You tried to destroy me," Richard said. "You and your father. You staged that little stunt at the gala. You doctored those videos. You tried to humiliate me in front of my peers." "I didn't doctor anything," Terrence said quietly. "It was live." "Silence," Richard roared, slamming his glass down. "You are an employee, a low-level custodial subcontractor. You speak when I tell you to speak, and right now I am telling you to listen." Richard stood up. He walked around the table, circling Terrence like a predator circling prey. "You are fired, Terrence. Obviously. But that is not enough. I am blackballing you. You will never work in this city again. Not in logistics, not in sales, not even in sanitation. I will make sure every employer knows you are a thief and a liar." He stopped in front of Terrence. He leaned in close. "And as for your father, tell him to watch his back. He thinks he is clever with his little gold badge. But I have friends too. Powerful friends. If I see him near this building again, I will have him arrested for vagrancy. I will have him thrown in a hole so deep the sun won't find him." Richard laughed. He turned back to the board. "Motion to terminate Terrence Freeman immediately with cause and forfeiture of all severance and benefits. Do I hear a second?" "Second," said a balding man at the end of the table without hesitation. "All in favor?" Richard asked, raising his hand. Every hand in the room went up. They were cowards. They followed the money. Richard grinned. "The motion carries. Get out of my building, Terrence, and give me your badge. You are trespassing." That was the moment I chose to enter. I did not knock. I did not ask for permission. I signaled to the security guard outside the door. He was one of mine. He swiped his card. The heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open with a hydraulic hiss. The sound turned every head in the room. I stepped through the threshold. I was not wearing the thrift store suit. I was not wearing the maintenance uniform. I was wearing a three-piece navy blue Tom Ford suit that had been tailored to my measurements by a master in Milan. The fabric absorbed the light. My shirt was crisp white Egyptian cotton. My tie was silk, a deep crimson that signaled power. On my feet were hand-stitched Italian leather shoes that made a distinct, authoritative click against the floor. I held my oak cane not for support, but as a scepter. Behind me walked Sarah Jenkins carrying a leather briefcase. Behind her were 4 associate attorneys in matching gray suits carrying boxes of files. We moved in formation. We moved like a tidal wave. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum where all the air had been sucked out. Richard stared. His mouth hung open. He looked at the suit. He looked at the shoes. He looked at the entourage. His brain could not reconcile the image of the janitor he knew with the Titan walking toward him. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. I did not answer him. I did not look at him. I looked at the board members. I made eye contact with the balding man who had seconded the motion to fire my son. He looked down at his papers, his hands trembling. I walked the length of the table. I walked past the vice presidents and the directors. I walked past my son who was smiling a small secret smile. I stopped at the head of the table. Richard was standing there frozen. He was in my way. I looked at him then. I looked him up and down. I looked at his rumpled suit. I looked at the sweat stains on his collar. I looked at the fear in his eyes. "You are in my seat, Richard," I said. My voice was low, calm, and terrifying. "Excuse me," Richard stammered. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a choke. "This is a private meeting, Elijah. You are the janitor. You clean the toilets. Security, get him out." He reached for the phone on the table. I placed my hand over his. My hand was heavy, calloused, and strong. I pressed his hand down onto the receiver. "Do not touch my phone," I said. "Your phone," Richard sputtered. He pulled his hand back as if he had been burned. "This is my company. I built this. I am the CEO." Sarah stepped forward. She placed her briefcase on the table with a solid thud. She snapped the latches open. The sound echoed like gunshots. She pulled out a single document. It was bound in blue legal paper. "Actually, Mr. Harrington," Sarah said, her voice crisp and professional, "that is factually incorrect." She slid the document down the table. It spun perfectly, coming to rest in front of the balding board member. "Mr. Henderson, read the first paragraph, please," Sarah said. Mr. Henderson picked up the paper. His hands were shaking. He adjusted his glasses. He read aloud, his voice wavering. "This agreement acknowledges the transfer of 51% of all voting stock and equity in Harrington Logistics to Freeman Holdings, LLC, effective immediately upon receipt of emergency liquidity funds." He stopped. He looked up at Richard. "Keep reading," Sarah commanded. Mr. Henderson swallowed. "The agreement further stipulates that the majority shareholder Freeman Holdings, LLC, retains exclusive rights to appoint the chairman of the board and holds veto power over all executive personnel decisions." The room erupted in whispers. 51%. Hostile takeover. Freeman Holdings. Richard stared at Sarah. Then he stared at me. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. "Freeman Holdings," he whispered. "That was you. You are the investor." "I am the investor," I said. "I am the bank. And I am the landlord." I tapped the cane on the floor. "Now, Richard, stand up." Richard didn't move. He was paralyzed by the magnitude of his mistake. He had sold his soul to the devil he thought he was crushing. "I said stand up!" I roared. My voice filled the room. It shook the windows. It was the voice of a man who had spent 40 years in the noise of industrial machinery. It was a voice that demanded obedience. Richard scrambled back. His chair tipped over and crashed to the floor. He stumbled away from the head of the table. I walked around the edge of the table. I picked up the chair. I set it upright. I unbuttoned my jacket. I sat down. I placed my hands on the mahogany surface. I looked out at the board of directors. I looked at the city skyline through the window. I looked at Richard standing by the wall, shaking. I turned to Sarah. "Ms. Jenkins, please record the minutes," I said. "Yes, Mr. Chairman. The first order of business," I said, "is a personnel matter." I pointed at Terrence. "Mr. Freeman, please approach the board." Terrence walked forward. He stood tall. He looked at me. "The previous motion to terminate Mr. Terrence Freeman is hereby vetoed by the chairman," I said. I looked at the board members. "Does anyone object?" Silence. Not a single hand went up. "Good," I said. "Furthermore, Mr. Terrence Freeman is hereby promoted. Effective immediately, he is the new Senior Vice President of Operations." I looked at Richard. "And you, Richard," I said. "You are fired." Richard gasped. "You can't fire me. The contract, it says I stay as CEO. It says you can't remove me without cause." I smiled. "Oh, I have cause, Richard," I said. "I have so much cause." Sarah pulled out another file. "Gross negligence," she read. "Misappropriation of company funds for personal use. Creating a hostile work environment. Violation of federal environmental safety standards. And public reputational damage due to the viral video incident of last night." She looked up. Clause 4, Section B. The CEO may be terminated immediately without severance for conduct detrimental to the brand. I looked at Richard. "You are detrimental, Richard," I said. "You are toxic. Pack your things," I said. "You have 10 minutes. Security will escort you out." Richard looked around the room. He looked for an ally. He looked for a friend. But there were no friends in this room, only employees of Freeman Holdings. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You planned this," he hissed. "You planned this whole thing. You set me up." "I didn't set you up," I said. "I just handed you the rope. You were the one who tied the noose. Get him out of here," I said to the security guards. 2 guards stepped forward, the same guards Richard had tried to order around the night before. They took him by the arms. They weren't gentle. "Get off me," Richard screamed as they dragged him toward the door. "I will sue you. I will ruin you." "You can try," I said, "but you will have to pay your lawyer first. And I own your bank account." The doors closed behind him, cutting off his screams. The room was quiet again. I looked at the board members. Now I said, "Let's talk about the cleaning schedule. This company has a lot of trash we need to take out." I looked at Terrence. He was smiling. It was a real smile, a free smile. "Welcome to the board, son," I said. He nodded. "Thanks, Dad. Or should I say Mr. Chairman?" "Dad is fine," I said. I leaned back in the chair. It was comfortable. It fit me perfectly. I had spent my life cleaning up other people's messes. Now I was finally in charge of the mess, and I was going to scrub it until it sparkled. Richard was not going quietly. Even as the security guards dragged him into the hallway, he was reaching for his phone. He was screaming threats and dialing numbers with frantic fingers. He was calling his private contractors. He was calling the corrupt police contacts he still thought he owned. He was trying to summon an army to retake his castle. But he did not understand that I had already mined the castle from beneath. I stood in the doorway of the boardroom and watched him struggle. I picked up my satellite phone. I did not call the police. I called the Freeman Sanitation Operations Center. "Shut it down," I said. "Sir," the operator asked. "The Harrington building. Initiate full containment protocol. Cut the main water line. Lock the electronic restroom access doors on every floor, and reverse the HVAC pressure in the waste ventilation shafts." "Are you sure, Mr. Freeman? That will make the building uninhabitable in less than 10 minutes. "Do it," I said. "Flush them out." I hung up. Deep within the bowels of the skyscraper, heavy machinery groaned. It was a sound I knew well. It was the sound of industrial valves closing and pressure pumps reversing. The lights flickered as the building's systems rerouted power. Then came the sound of rushing air. It started in the basement, but it rose quickly. A low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Richard stopped struggling. He looked around confused. "What did you do?" he shouted. "I just pulled the plug, Richard," I said. Then the smell hit. It wasn't just a bad odor. It was the concentrated essence of 40 stories of waste that had been backed up and pressurized. It blasted out of the vents. It seeped from the drains. It was a physical wall of stench that smelled like rot and sewage and decay. It smelled like Richard's soul. Doors opened all down the hallway. Executives and secretaries stumbled out, coughing and gagging, covering their noses with handkerchiefs. "Oh my God," one woman screamed. "It smells like death." The water coolers bubbled and went dry. The toilets in the executive washroom locked automatically, displaying red maintenance lights. The building was rejecting its occupants. "You cannot do this," Richard screamed, his eyes watering from the fumes. "This is illegal. This is bioterrorism." "It is maintenance," I said, walking toward him. "I detected a severe blockage in the system. I have to clear the pipes. And the biggest clog in this building is you." The lobby downstairs was chaos. The elevators were packed with people fleeing the stench. When we stepped out of the elevator, the air was thick and heavy. The receptionist who had sneered at me that morning was gone, having fled her post. Richard broke free from the guards. He stood in the center of the lobby, gasping for fresh air. He looked at his empire, which was now emptying out in a stampede of disgusted employees. "You destroyed it," he whispered. "You destroyed my legacy." I walked up to him. Sarah was right beside me. She handed me a document. "I didn't destroy it, Richard," I said. "I just revealed what it really was. A pile of waste wrapped in glass." I held up the paper. Notice of termination for cause, I read aloud. Effective immediately. Richard Harrington is relieved of all duties as CEO of Harrington Logistics. Reason for termination includes gross mismanagement, embezzlement of corporate funds, and creating a catastrophic environmental hazard. You are firing me, Richard asked. His voice was small. He looked like a child who had lost his mother. I am firing you, I said, and I am evicting you. Sarah stepped forward. She signaled to two men in jumpsuits waiting by the door. They weren't janitors. They were repossession agents, Mr. Harrington, Sarah said. We have also exercised the default clauses on your personal debts. Since you have no income and no liquid assets, we are seizing collateral to cover the $12 million note. The men stepped forward. One of them held out his hand. Keys, sir, the agent said. What keys? Richard asked, trembling. The car, the agent said. The Bentley parked out front. And the keys to the penthouse. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises before we change the locks. My house, Richard choked out. You are taking my house. It is not your house, I said. It is my asset, and I don't like tenants who don't pay. Richard looked at the keys in his hand. He looked at the Bentley visible through the glass doors. It was his pride. It was his symbol. He dropped the keys into the agent's hand. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor. He looked exactly like Terrence had looked in that bathroom. Defeated. Broken. I walked over to him. I leaned down. How does it feel, Richard? I asked. To be the trash. He didn't answer. He just wept. But the cleaning wasn't done yet. There was one stain left to scrub. The revolving doors spun. Paige came running in. She was disheveled. Her makeup was smeared. She had clearly seen the news. She had seen the stock price plummeting. She had seen the text messages from her friends dumping her. But when she saw us, she didn't run to her father. She didn't comfort the man weeping on the floor. She ran straight to Terrence. Baby, she cried out breathlessly. Oh, thank God you are here. She grabbed Terrence's arm. Her nails dug into his suit jacket. Terrence, you have to stop him, she said, pointing at me. Your father has gone crazy. He is ruining us. He fired Daddy. He is taking the condo. You have to tell him to stop. Terrence looked down at her. He didn't pull away. He just stood there, solid as a rock. He isn't ruining us, Paige Terrence said. He is saving me. Paige's eyes darted around the lobby. She saw the repossession agents. She saw the security guards. She saw the power shifting. She realized her father was a husk. She needed a new host. Baby, listen to me, she pleaded, changing her tone instantly. Her voice became soft wet with fake tears. I know I made mistakes. I know I lied about the pregnancy, but I did it for us. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you. I love you, Terrence. We can start over. Just you and me. She reached for his face. We can go away, she whispered. Your father has money now, right? He can set us up. We can go to Europe. We can have a real baby. I promise. I will make it up to you. It was the most pathetic display I had ever seen. She was a parasite looking for a vein. Terrence took her hand from his face. He held it for a second. He looked at her fingers, the ones that had never done a day of work in their lives. Then he let it drop. You are right, Paige, he said. You are right about one thing. I only know how to clean. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a white envelope. So I am taking out the trash, he said. He handed her the envelope. What is this? She asked, her hands trembling. Divorce papers, Terrence said, and a restraining order. Paige stared at the envelope. No, she whispered. You can't. We are married. Not anymore, Terrence said. And inside there is something else. She opened the envelope. She pulled out a stack of photos. They were screen captures from the video I had taken in the apartment. Photos of the silicone belly. Photos of her smoking. Photos of her laughing. And underneath that was a subpoena. I gave the evidence to the district attorney, Terrence said. Insurance fraud is a felony, Paige. Soliciting donations for a fake medical condition is a felony. You raised $10,000 online for a high-risk pregnancy that didn't exist. That is wire fraud. Paige looked up. Her face was white. You called the police, she gasped. On your wife. You are not my wife, Terrence said. You are a con artist. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Blue lights flashed against the glass of the lobby doors. Run, Paige, I said, stepping forward. Maybe you can make it to the border. She looked at me. She looked at Richard sobbing on the floor. She looked at Terrence, who was looking at her with nothing but cold indifference. She screamed. It was a sound of pure rage. She threw the papers at Terrence. "I hate you," she shrieked. "I hate you all. You are garbage. You will always be garbage." She turned to run, but it was too late. 2 police officers walked through the doors. They weren't the corrupt cops Richard used to own. These were federal agents. Paige Harrington, one of them said, holding up a badge. She stopped. She tried to back away. "No," she whimpered. "My father will fix this. Daddy, tell them." She looked at Richard. Richard didn't even look up. He was broken. He had nothing left to give her. The agents grabbed her arms. They spun her around. They cuffed her hands behind her back, the same hands that had held champagne while mocking my son. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent said. Paige was sobbing now. Real ugly tears. "Terrence, help me," she begged as they dragged her toward the door. "Please don't let them take me. I am scared." Terrence watched her go. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. He turned to me. "Is it done, Dad?" he asked. I looked at the empty lobby. I looked at the fallen king on the floor. I looked at the queen being hauled away in chains. "It is done, son," I said. The smell in the building was awful, but to me it smelled like victory. It smelled like a clean slate. "Let's go home," I said. We walked out into the night, leaving the ruins of the Harrington Empire behind us. We had scrubbed the stain away, and now finally we could build something real. 6 months passed before I saw Richard Harrington again. The winter had come early to the city, turning the streets into rivers of gray slush and freezing rain. I was sitting in my car outside the old Harrington building, which now bore the name Freeman Environmental Services, in modest steel lettering. I wasn't there to work. I was there to conduct an interview. Sarah had told me that a walk-in applicant had been begging for a meeting for 3 days. He had no appointment. He had no resume. But he refused to leave the lobby. I told security to let him in. When the man walked into the office, he looked 20 years older than the last time I saw him. His hair was white and thinning. His face was gaunt, the skin hanging loose around his jaw. He was wearing a suit, but it wasn't bespoke. It was off the rack, ill-fitting and stained with rain. He held a plastic bag with his worldly possessions. It was Richard. He didn't look at me with arrogance anymore. He looked at the floor. He wringed his hands together. "Elijah," he said, his voice cracking, "thank you for seeing me. I have been having a hard time." I didn't offer him a seat. I sat behind the desk that used to be his. "What do you want, Richard?" I asked. "I need work, Elijah," he whispered. "Nobody will hire me. The video, everyone has seen it. I lost the condo. I lost the car. I am sleeping in a shelter on 5th Street. They stole my shoes last night." He pointed to his feet. He was wearing canvas sneakers that were soaked through. "I need a job, Elijah. Anything. I know the logistics business. I can consult. I can help with the routing." I shook my head. "I don't need a consultant, Richard. My logistics are running at 98% efficiency. I cleaned up your mess weeks ago." Richard slumped. "Please, I am begging you. I am hungry." I looked at him. I didn't feel pity. I felt balance. The scales of the universe were finally even. "I do have a position open," I said. Richard's head snapped up. Hope flared in his eyes. "Really? I will take it." "VP of Sales Regional Manager." "No," I said. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. I pulled out a bundle of gray fabric. I tossed it across the desk. It landed in front of him. It was a jumpsuit, the same gray jumpsuit Terrence had worn. "The position is custodial engineer," I said. "Night shift, minimum wage, no benefits for the first 6 months." Richard stared at the uniform, his face flushed red. "You want me to be a janitor?" he whispered. "I want you to be useful," I said. "That is the job, Richard. Take it or go back to the shelter." He looked at the door. He looked at the cold rain beating against the window. He looked at the uniform. He picked it up. "I will take it," he said. "Good," I said. "You start now. The executive washroom on the 40th floor is filthy." I walked him to the elevator. We rode up in silence. When the doors opened, I led him down the plush hallway to the glass-walled bathroom. Terrence was standing there waiting. He was wearing a sharp blazer and holding a clipboard. He looked strong. He looked whole. Richard stopped when he saw my son. He couldn't meet his eyes. "Here's your equipment," Mr. Harrington Terrence said. He pointed to the bucket and the blue brush. The same brush. Richard went into the bathroom. He put on the jumpsuit over his cheap clothes. He got on his knees. He dipped the brush in the water. I stood outside the glass with Terrence. We watched the man who had once been a king scrubbing the porcelain. I tapped on the glass. Richard looked up. "Make it shine, Richard," I said. "I have VIPs coming tonight." He didn't argue. He just scrubbed harder. Terrence looked at me. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just nodded. "It is done, Dad," he said. "Yes, son," I said. "It is done." We left Richard to his work. He had a lot of scrubbing to do to clean his soul. Later that afternoon, I sat with Terrence in the conference room. I had the transfer papers ready. I wanted to give him the VP title. I wanted to give him the salary he deserved. I pushed the contract across the table. "Sign here, son," I said. "You are the new Vice President of Operations. The office next to mine is yours." Terrence looked at the contract. He looked at the salary figure. It was more money than he had ever seen. He picked up the pen. He hesitated. Then he put the pen down. "I can't sign this, Dad," he said. I frowned. "Why not? It is yours. You earned it. You survived." "I survived," Terrence said, "but I didn't earn it." "Not yet." He stood up and walked to the window looking out at the city. "If I take this job now, I am just doing what Paige wanted me to do. I am taking the easy way. I am riding your coattails. I don't want to be the owner's son who got the job because of his last name. I want to be the man who knows how to run the company because he understands the work." He turned to me. His eyes were clear and determined. "I enrolled in the university this morning, Dad. They have a master's program in environmental resource management. It is a 2-year degree. I want to learn the science behind your filters. I want to understand the engineering. I want to know how to build the next patent, not just sell the old one." I looked at him. My heart swelled in my chest. He wasn't looking for a handout. He was looking for a legacy. "I want to work part-time," Terrence continued. "But not as a VP. I want to work in the field. I want to go out with the crews. I want to learn the routes. I want to know what it feels like to haul the cans at 4 in the morning. When I sit in that chair one day, I want to know that I belong there." I stood up. I stood. I walked around the table and hugged him. It was a fierce, proud hug. "You are a free man," I whispered. "You make me proud every day." "So you are okay with it?" he asked, pulling back. I picked up the contract. I tore it in half. "I am more than okay with it," I said. "Go to school, learn everything, and when you are ready, this chair will be waiting for you. Not because you are my son, but because you are the best man for the job." Terrence smiled. It was the smile of a man who had found his own worth. "Thanks, Dad." He grabbed his coat. "I have class in an hour," he said. "I don't want to be late." "Go," I said. He walked out of the office. He didn't walk like a servant anymore. He walked like a king in training. That evening, I sat on the porch of my small brick house. I hadn't moved. I hadn't bought a mansion. I liked this house. It was paid for. It was honest. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I watched Terrence drive away in his new truck. It wasn't a Bentley. It was a solid, reliable Ford. He waved as he turned the corner. I took a sip of my iced tea. I looked down at my hands. They were old hands, knotted with arthritis, scarred from years of manual labor. These hands had cleaned toilets. They had unclogged sewers. They had swept floors. People look at hands like mine and they see failure. They see dirt. They see someone who didn't try hard enough in school. They see someone they can ignore, someone they can step over, someone they can mistreat. Richard saw a janitor and thought he saw a slave. He didn't know that the janitor is the most important person in the building. Without us, the garbage piles up. Without us, the pipes burst. Without us, the disease spreads. We are the immune system of civilization. We do the work that the men in suits are too afraid to touch. I thought about the red X's I had drawn on the walls of the ballroom. I thought about the mold and the rot hiding behind the gold paint. That is the world we live in. Shiny on the outside, rotten in the middle. There are a lot of Richards out there. Men who think a tie makes them better than a jumpsuit. Men who think money is a license to cruelty. They walk around with their heads high, ignoring the people who clean the path in front of them. But they forget one thing. The man who holds the broom sees everything. We see what you throw away. We see what you try to hide. We see who you really are when you think no one is watching. And sometimes the man holding the broom also holds the deed. I am Elijah Freeman. I am a janitor, and I am the CEO. Never underestimate the person cleaning your bathroom. They might just be the one who decides when to flush. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice served cold. And remember, treat everyone with respect. You never know who is signing the checks. I leaned back in my chair and watched the stars come out. The air was clean. The street was quiet. It was a good night to be a janitor. This story teaches us that true power is not defined by the clothes we wear or the titles on our doors, but by the integrity we hold in our hearts. Richard believed his wealth made him superior, but his arrogance became the architect of his own destruction. He underestimated the value of honest labor and the strength of a father's love. My son learned the hardest way possible that dignity cannot be bought. It must be defended. Never look down on anyone because the hand that holds the broom today might be the hand that signs your paycheck tomorrow. True worth is always found on the inside. If you believe that justice should always prevail, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about standing tall against those who try to keep you down.